Chapter 664. Little Yu. Jiang Lan looked to Qin Yu. His eyes were filled with worry. Their opponents this time around were not just one or two. Instead, they were the 8 great sage emperors, the numerous god kings, the Azura god king and the Blood Sea Queen. Once these people joined hands, even Qin Yu would likely not be able to withstand them. Rest assured, Uncle Lan, Qin Yu said with a mocking smile. It is indeed very frightening when they join hands. However, I am no fool. I will not fight them head-on. If I am truly unable to withstand them, wouldn't it be fine if I directly escape into the new cosmos? Haha. Qin De, Qin Feng, Ho Fei, Kuro and a large group of people beside him, including Jiang Lan and them, all started to laugh in a relaxed manner. For Qin Yu to have the thought of escaping, they were all relieved. Uncle Fu. Qin Yu turned around and looked behind him. At this moment, Uncle Fu was standing behind a group of people. Hearing Qin Yu's words, Uncle Fu immediately walked over. After hearing Qin Yu's order, Uncle Fu immediately walked over. Go and arrange for the gate of the Fog City to be closed. The entire Fog City will be completely isolated from the outside world. If any danger were to appear, I will move the entire Fog City, including the Purple Mystic Mansion, into the new cosmos. Qin Yu said with a light smile. The surface of the Fog City was covered with a formation array space. Once the gate of the city was closed, the entire Fog City would be within the formation array space. As long as Qin Yu was willing, the people inside the Fog City would be unknowingly moved to the new cosmos by Qin Yu. Yes, Master. Uncle Fu directly accepted the order. Little Yu, I am relieved now that you're like this. In that case, I'll be going to the new cosmos Purple Mystic Star. Jiang Lan nodded to Qin Yu, and then flew toward the Purple Mystic Mansion. This Fog City possessed a special channel that led to the new cosmos. Of course, if outsiders wanted to pass through that channel, they would only be able to do so after obtaining Qin Yu's permission. Otherwise, even if they managed to reach the channel, they would still not be able to enter the new cosmos. Seeing Uncle Lan leave, Qin Yu felt a sense of satisfaction in his heart. I've finally done something for Uncle Lan. Qin Yu was deeply grateful toward Jiang Lan. Merely in the past, he had never had the opportunity to repay Jiang Lan. And now the opportunity had come. Qin Yu also had the strength. Qin Yu's new universe's spatial power covered the entire God world, including the exalted celestial mountain. Naturally, Qin Yu was able to clearly see each and every action of those god kings. Even their words and their gazes. Outside of the relief sculpture tunnel, the 8 great sage emperors, over 20 ordinary god kings as well as the powerful Azura god king and Blood Sea Queen were all gathered here. And there was a restriction set up around the group of god kings. Unfortunately, the restriction was completely useless against Qin Yu's Nebula Cosmos spatial power. Never would I have expected that you, Azura god king, would actually be outside the relief sculpture tunnel's entrance. The utmost West Sage Emperor Shintu Yen said with a sneer. Last time, Azura god king, you openly swore that you did not have the slightest bit of ambition for the exalted celestial's spiritual treasure. But now, it seems that humph. Mu Qin, who had an ugly expression, also sneered. This Mu Qin and Shintu Yen were extremely resentful toward the Azura god king. That was because there were only 2 god kings in the northeastern region's Forest Ocean City. One was Mu Qin, and the other was Mu Chan. And last time, when the Blue Sky Seal appeared, that Azura god king killed 8 god kings. Among them, 4 were from the 8 great divine families. They were Shintu Yen, Mu Chan, Duanmu Lu and Tang Lu. Currently, there was only a single sage emperor left in the northeastern region's Forest Ocean City. There were also only 2 sage emperors left in the utmost western region's Mount Blazing Flame. Mu Qin and Shintu Yen were naturally extremely resentful toward the Azura god king. Haha, I never said that I would no longer fight for the Back Earth Seal and All People Seal. I merely said that I would no longer step into the exalted celestial mountain. The Azura god king Luo Fan knew very well that these 2 people were merely looking for trouble. Well then, everyone quiet down for a moment. Zhou Hua said in a clear voice. Immediately, the sounds of discussion died down. Many god kings looked to Zhou Hua. At this moment, Jiang Fan, who stood beside Zhou Hua, had a pale complexion. In the short battle earlier, many experts were injured. Jiang Fan and many other god kings were injured by Jiang Lan. As for Duan Muyin, Huang Fuyu and Pu Tai Hong, they were injured by the god king of death Zhuqiulin. The three great sage emperors were merely struck by a single attack. However, their souls had all been damaged. If they were to merely recuperate, it would take them at least 10,000 years to recover. And now, at this crucial moment, they could only use precious spiritual pellets to recover their souls. Before we discuss the matter of the Back Earth Seal, I wish to ask the Azura God King, how did that Jiang Lan escape from your hands? Zhou Hua looked to the Azura God King. Go ahead and ask. The Azura God King said with a light smile. Zhou Hua said in confusion. Azura God King, you were right outside this relief sculpture tunnel. With your strength, I believe it would not be hard for you to capture Jiang Lan. However, how did Jiang Lan escape? Are you able to dispel our confusion? Qinyu, the Azura God King said indifferently. At the crucial moment, that Qinyu acted to obstruct me and saved Jiang Lan and them. Hearing the name Qinyu, Zhou Hua's eyes shined with a cold light. Even Zhou Ran, who was behind Zhou Hua, was unable to refrain himself from clenching his fist. Even his killing intent was exposed from his eyes. The hatred between the Thunder Punishment City and Qinyu was truly too great. In the battle before the descent of the exalted Celestial Mountain, Qinyu had killed Zhou Wulian and Zhou Tong. This had caused the strength of the Thunder Punishment City to decrease greatly. Their prestige had also decreased greatly. Even their status had decreased greatly. He killed my father and second uncle. Zhou Ran was once again filled with endless killing intent. However, upon thinking of Qinyu's strength, Zhou Ran felt a sense of powerlessness in his heart. The disparity between him and Qinyu was truly too great. Not to mention him, even the sage emperors were no match for Qinyu. Thus, how could he possibly take revenge? In order to take revenge, other than my grandfather personally taking action, I can only rely on these god kings. Zhou Ran glanced at the surrounding god kings. The 8 great sage emperors and the Azura God King were all present. Once these people joined hands, it would not be hard for them to kill Qinyu. Zhou Hua and Zhou Ran glanced at each other. The two of them had communicated a lot through their divine awareness. Everyone ought to know that Jiang Lan, Yi Feng, and that mysterious woman are all related to Qinyu. Although we do not know where Jiang Lan is right now, going to the Fog City to find Qinyu is most definitely the best and most direct method. Zhou Hua said in a clear voice. The surrounding sage emperors and god kings all began to ponder. They all nodded. Regardless of where Jiang Lan was, if they wanted to take care of Jiang Lan, they must be prepared to take care of Qinyu. Furthermore, they were unable to ascertain where Jiang Lan was right now. Thus, they could only go to the Fog City to find Qinyu. Other than this, they did not have any other good methods. This Qinyu is extremely powerful. If we were to proceed toward him like a plate of loose sand, I fear that we would be defeated by that Qinyu one by one. The Dual Domain Island's word-seeking God King said indifferently. Everyone's strength is different. Thus, it's better to make arrangements. It would not be too late for us to proceed after we have made preparations. Furthermore, after the battle earlier, many of the God Kings and Sage Emperors were injured. We must be in our best condition to fight against Qinyu. If any of you do not have any spiritual pellets to recover your soul, you can borrow them from the other God Kings. The words spoken by this Dual Domain Island's word-seeking God King immediately received many responses. Even Jiang Fan and them nodded in agreement. If a group of God Kings were not united, then they would still be able to chase after Jiang Lan relentlessly. However, if they were to encounter Qinyu who was stronger than them, then they would likely all be eaten by Qinyu like eating beans. Zhou Ran, who stood behind Zhou Hua, took a step forward. With a clear voice he said, Currently, we have the 8 great sage emperors, 25 ordinary god kings, and the Azura God King. The Azura God King's strength is sufficient to take on Qinyu by himself. If the 8 great sage emperors were to join hands, they would be even more powerful. The 25 ordinary god kings are completely capable of setting up 2 great formation arrays. One would be the 4 symbols illusion defensive formation, set up by 16 people. As for the other, It would be set up by 9 people. What a joke. The Blood Demon Queen of the Mount Blood Demon laughed. Setting up a great formation array? I do not feel at ease setting up a formation array with the people of your 8 great divine families. Perhaps I might even be killed by them. I also do not agree. The Blood Sea Queen, who had been silent the entire time, said coldly. To obtain the Back Earth Seal, one must rely on one's own ability. Qin Yu, who was in the Purple Mystic Mansion, had his eyes closed. Through the new cosmos's spatial energy, he was carefully listening to the debate between those god kings. Finally, after the mediation of Zhou Ran, Zhou Hua, Jiang Fan and them, they reached an agreement. It's time for me to appear. Qin Yu suddenly opened his eyes. He then stood up. On the meadow beside him, Jiang Li was chatting and laughing with Bai Ling and many other women. Brother Yu. Jiang Li looked to Qin Yu with a confused expression. Li I'm going out for a bit. You all stay here. Qin Yu instructed. After that, he directly teleported and disappeared from the Purple Mystic Mansion. Outside of the Fog City, clouds and mist were lingering about. Qin Yu was within this endless amount of clouds and mist. He gathered a floating cloud, and then sat on top of it. A tea table was placed before him. On the tea table was a jug of wine. Leisurely, Qin Yu poured himself a cup of wine, and began to drink. After a long while, huff! A surge of energy whistled over from afar. The endless amount of clouds and mist surrounding Qin Yu immediately dissipated. The sky within several tens of thousands of miles immediately became clear and bright. Merely, that surge of energy did not even mess up Qin Yu's hair in the slightest. Over 30 figures appeared before Qin Yu out of thin air. The 8 great sage emperors, the Azura God King, the Blood Sea Queen, and the rest of the God Kings were all looking at the current Qin Yu with astonishment. Faced with so many God Kings, Qin Yu was actually calmly drinking wine here. Qin Yu raised his head and took a glance at the various God Kings. You've only arrived now? Qin Yu stretched his waist and then stood up. I've already finished this jug of wine. Furthermore, before this, I had already stayed in my mansion for quite some time. Truth be told, your speed is truly very slow. Qin Yu had a light smile on his face. His gaze swept past the 30-plus God Kings before him in the slightest. Azura God King, Blood Sea Queen. Qin Yu's gaze stopped for a moment on these 2 God Kings. Among these God Kings, only these 2 God Kings caused Qin Yu to be slightly afraid. Of course, the combined strength of the 8 great sage emperors was also extremely frightening. Qin Yu, quickly have Jiang Lan hand over the Back Earth Seal. You refused to participate in the battle for the exalted celestial mountain, and instead decided to involve yourself in this matter. Could it be that you're courting death? That Zhou Hua said coldly. Zhou Hua was incomparably resentful toward Qin Yu. The current him was not afraid of Qin Yu at all. You want Uncle Lan to hand over the Back Earth Seal? Truly ridiculous. I wish to ask you all. The blue sky seal that appeared last time was obtained by the Azura God King, right? Why don't you all have the Azura God King hand over the blue sky seal? Could it be that you all think that my Uncle Lan is easy to bully, that I, Qin Yu, am easy to bully? A cold light flashed through Qin Yu's eyes. The jug of wine in his hand was instantly crushed into powder. The Azura God King lightly smiled and said, Qin Yu, after I obtained the blue sky seal, I also swore to never step foot onto the exalted celestial mountain again. That's why. Uncle Lan could also swear to never step foot onto the exalted celestial mountain again. Qin Yu immediately interrupted the Azura God King. Qin Yu's gaze then turned to the 8 great sage emperors. If Uncle Lan were to swear, are you all willing to let him go? The 8 great sage emperors were stunned. Qin Yu. Zhou Ran, who stood beside Zhou Hua, pointed at Qin Yu and shouted. Today the 8 great sage emperors, the Azura God King and numerous other God Kings have all gathered here. We are here to persuade you with kind words. However, you do not possess the slightest bit of sincerity, and instead are arguing. Today, numerous God Kings have come precisely to obtain the Back Earth Seal. Have Jiang Lan hand it over. If he were to hand it over, then everything would be fine. If not. Once Zhou Ran said those words, the 8 great sage emperors all began to gather together. They seemed to be preparing to join hands. Even the Azura God King and the Blood Sea Queen were staring at Qin Yu. If not? You're saying if not to me? Qin Yu looked to Zhou Ran. Are you threatening me? Earlier, when Qin Yu had used his new cosmos spatial energy to observe the discussion between the God Kings, this Zhou Ran had been persuading them to join hands the entire time. Evidently, this Zhou Ran still possessed a great hatred for Qin Yu. Zhou Ran's eyes were filled with anger. Killing intent grew in his heart. So what if I am threatening you? Spatial freezing. The space within several tens of thousands of miles immediately stopped moving. Whoosh! At practically the same time, Qin Yu used spatial freezing and teleported to Zhou Ran's side. The divine spear waning snow in his hand was thrust forth with lightning speed. Its speed was extremely fast. Impudent! Zhou Hua and the other sage emperors were all enraged. That Zhou Ran wanted to escape with teleportation. However, as he was unable to teleport, how could he possibly dodge Qin Yu's spear? Beside him, Zhou Hua took out a black whip and coiled it toward the spear in Qin Yu's hand. The dark and yellow energy on the surface of the divine spear waning snow slightly trembled. The black whip was shattered. The divine spear waning snow directly pierced into Zhou Ran's chest. The frightening energy directly rushed into Zhou Ran's mind. Bang! Zhou Ran's head exploded. He died on the spot. I do not like others threatening me. Qin Yu held the divine spear waning snow in his hand and swept his gaze across the surrounding God Kings. When those God Kings discovered that they were unable to teleport, but Qin Yu was able to, they all started to tremble in fear. Chapter 665. Oh, as if they were frightened, the group of God Kings all moved back several hundred meters with lightning speed. All of the God Kings present, including the 8 great sage emperors, maintained a certain distance from Qin Yu. Qin Yu. Zhou Hua pointed at Qin Yu angrily. Zhou Ran had died. From today on, his Thunder Punishment City only had a single sage emperor. Other than him, Zhou Hua, there was no other God King. As for Zhou Wulian and Zhou Tong from before, they were also killed by Qin Yu. How could Zhou Hua not feel resentment toward Qin Yu? His resentment had already penetrated deep into his heart. What's wrong? Northwest Sage Emperor. Do you have something to say to me? With a light smile on his face, Qin Yu looked at Zhou Hua. He held the divine spear waning snow in his hand with a single hand. It was as if he was prepared to attack at any moment. Zhou Hua pointed at Qin Yu. His lips moved a few times. However, he did not say anything. At this moment, the 30-plus God Kings all had their own thoughts. God Kings with ordinary strength were all rather fearful of Qin Yu. Under the state of spatial freezing, Qin Yu was still able to teleport. As for the other God Kings, they were simply unable to teleport. With just this, Qin Yu had already grasped the absolute initiative. In the eyes of the God Kings, other than the Azura God King Luo Fan, there was no other God King present that could contend against Qin Yu. These God Kings did not know of the Blood Sea Queen's true strength. After all, when the Blood Sea Queen was at the exalted celestial mountain, she did not even have the time to use time stop before being trapped by Yifeng. Qin Yu swept his gaze across the God Kings. A smile appeared on his face. Everything was exactly as he had imagined. He had suddenly appeared and killed Zhou Ran. The feeling of their lives not being under their control had already caused fear to appear in the hearts of these God Kings. They were no longer as tyrannical as before. Right now, the most troublesome ones are the Azura God King and the Blood Sea Queen. They both possess the ability to use time stop. Once they use time stop, I will not be able to move. Furthermore, with the 8 great sage emperors joining hands, their attack power will be extremely frightening. Qin Yu also felt the pressure. If the Azura God King, the Blood Sea Queen, the 8 great sage emperors, and the others were to join hands, he could only choose to teleport away. Qin Yu. The Blood Sea Queen's voice sounded in Qin Yu's mind. Qin Yu turned to look at the Blood Sea Queen. The two of them looked at each other for a moment. After that, the Blood Sea Queen had a confident smile on her face. Qin Yu, at this moment, you should be very clear that once the 8 great saint emperors join forces, you are simply unable to go against them. Furthermore, there was also the Azura God King. At the same time, there is also me. Qin Yu, you will undoubtedly lose. The Blood Sea Queen's divine awareness voice transmission resounded in Qin Yu's mind. Qin Yu shifted his gaze from the Blood Sea Queen to the 8 great sage emperors. However, his attention was focused on the Azura God King and the Blood Sea Queen. At the same time, he sent a voice transmission to the Blood Sea Queen. Blood Sea Queen, you should know my strength very well. What you said is correct. It is simply impossible for me to take on all of you by myself. Especially when there are you and the Azura God King. Merely, you must understand that I cannot defeat you all. I am able to escape. Under the state of spatial freezing, none of you are able to teleport. Only I am able to teleport. With merely this, I am already in an undefeatable position. Blood Sea Queen, what do you think? The Blood Sea Queen was startled. She clenched her teeth tightly. Her gaze also turned gloomy and cold. She cursed in her heart. This Qin Yu, how could he possibly teleport under the state of spatial freezing? Among all of us, only he is able to teleport. Even before the battle, he is already undefeatable. Seeing the Blood Sea Queen's expression, Qin Yu smiled. Qin Yu, have Jiang Lan hand over the back earth seal. I truly do not wish to fight against you. I hope that you will not force me. The Azura God King's voice sounded in Qin Yu's mind. Qin Yu looked to the Azura God King. At this moment, the Azura God King Luo Fan was looking at Qin Yu with his bright and shining gaze. Suddenly a loud shout sounded. Qin Yu, you actually killed Zhou Ran in front of all the God Kings. You truly do not place us in your eyes. Did you really think that you would be able to contend against all of us God Kings by yourself? Jiang Fan's eyes were shining. He was filled with an oppressive aura. Qin Yu, have Jiang Lan hand over the back earth seal, and we can spare your lives. Otherwise, the 8 great sage emperors seemed to have a tacit understanding. The 8 of them immediately returned to their respective positions and formed a profound formation array. The 8 origin spiritual pearls were shining with dazzling light. The various colored cosmic origin energies started to flow unceasingly. They fused with each other and complemented each other. Frightening auras were being emitted from the 8 great sage emperors. Qin Yu's heart tightened. When these 8 great sage emperors joined hands, even the Azura God King would not be able to resist them. Single aura 8 elements, its might is extremely frightening. Qin Yu still remembered the scene of the thunder punishment exalted celestial, using single aura 8 elements to destroy the fog city. If he were to face them head-on, he would definitely not be able to contend against them. He could only escape. Haha. Qin Yu suddenly faced the sky and laughed loudly. Those God Kings were all feeling uncertain. Qin Yu immediately stopped laughing. He looked to Jiang Fan and the other 8 great sage emperors. 8 great sage emperors, humph, your single aura 8 elements is extremely powerful. However, if you want to threaten me, haha, in your dreams. If you want to attack, then come. The fog of the fog marsh gradually started to gather toward Qin Yu. Within the endless fog, Qin Yu was standing in the air. He held the divine spear Waning Snow in his hand. With a light smile on his face, he faced the God Kings led by the 8 great sage emperors. Let me remind you all. The moment when you all attack is also the moment when I attack. I shall see whether you all will kill me first, or if I will kill you all first. Qin Yu, who held the divine spear Waning Snow in his hand, suddenly started to change. He turned into 2. The cyan gown Qin Yu and the black gown Qin Yu stood side by side. Immediately after, the cyan gown Qin Yu teleported and disappeared from the eyes of the God Kings. He directly arrived several hundred meters behind the 8 great sage emperors. The cyan gown Qin Yu and the black gown Qin Yu stood in the air. Between them were the God Kings. Jiang Fan, Zhou Hua, Duan Muyin, Shen Tuyen, and them all started to hesitate. This brother Jiang Fan, this Qin Yu is capable of teleportation. However, we are unable to. If we are to truly fight against this Qin Yu head-on, the single aura 8 elements will definitely be destroyed. Even if the single aura 8 elements is able to track down the enemy, our losses will definitely be extremely great. Duan Muyin said via divine awareness voice transmission. The 8 great sage emperors were communicating with each other through their eyes. The 8 great sage emperors who were extremely domineering in the past were currently hesitating. At the moment when Qin Yu was in a deadlock with the 8 great sage emperors, the Azura God King and the Blood Sea God King, Jiang Lan was currently sitting cross-legged on the top floor of a newly constructed palace on the new Cosmos Purple Mystic Stars East Hazy Mountain. In this palace, time had been accelerated by 100,000 times. Originally, Qin Yu had been quietly waiting for the God Kings in the Purple Mystic Mansion for a while. After that, he drank a jug of wine on top of the white clouds. About 4 to 6 hours had passed. 4 to 6 hours. Inside the palace, Jiang Lan had been training for 200 to 300,000 hours. Close to 20,000 days was equivalent to several tens of years. To Jiang Lan, several tens of years of quiet training was an enormous amount of progress. In the Blue Sky Seal, the description of time acceleration was the most common. Time stop was second. Time reversal was the rarest. In the Back Earth Seal, the description of time stop was the most common. Time acceleration was second. Time reversal was the rarest. As for the most important All-People Seal, the description of time reversal was the most common. As for time acceleration and time stop, they were relatively rare. However, even if one were to obtain the All-People Seal, it would still be extremely difficult for one to comprehend time reversal. That was because the two most important portions regarding time reversal in the All-People Seal were respectively contained in the Blue Sky Seal and the Back Earth Seal. Without these two portions, it would be extremely difficult for one to comprehend it. The description of time reversal in the Blue Sky Seal was too rare. This was also the reason why the Azura God King Luo Fan did not make any progress in the temporal laws, even though he had been training for all these years. After all, what he had obtained was the Blue Sky Seal. However, what Jiang Lan had obtained was the Back Earth Seal. Jiang Lan's comprehension of the temporal laws had already reached the limit of time acceleration. He even possessed a vague understanding of time stop. Merely, he lacked a clear understanding and a final comprehension the entire time. The Back Earth Seal possessed the most information regarding time stop. The current Jiang Lan was like a thirsty traveler in the desert who had suddenly discovered an oasis and a clear and sweet water source. He immediately began to study and comprehend the contents of the Back Earth Seal. The current Jiang Lan had completely sunk into the world of temporal laws. As Jiang Lan was studying and comprehending the Back Earth Seal, he did not notice the passage of time at all. On a certain day when he had been studying for 80 years, Jiang Lan's body slightly trembled. He then opened his eyes. He had a smile on his face, yet also seemed like he was crying. Time stop, time stop. Currently, I am able to stop time. However, I am unable to stop the time that Amei and I spent together. Jiang Lan's face was filled with endless desolation. In merely 80 years, Jiang Lan had managed to completely remove the fuzzy veil that covered the time stop. Once he broke through that layer, he completely understood the time stop. The reason why he was able to comprehend the time stop so quickly was related to Jiang Lan's own accomplishments in the temporal laws. Merely, after comprehending the time stop, Jiang Lan did not have the slightest trace of joy in his heart. At this moment, the scenes of him being together with Zhuqiumei were unceasingly flashing through Jiang Lan's mind. Occasionally, he would smile like a fool. Occasionally, he would sigh desolately. How much did he wish to stop the time from back then? He wanted to return to the days when he was together with Zhuqiumei. He wanted those happy days to stop forever. He wanted those happy scenes to become eternal. However impossible, Zhuqiumei's true spirit had scattered. Even if an exalted celestial were to use time reversal, it would still be impossible for Zhuqiumei to be revived. Jiang Lan recalled the final scene of Zhuqiumei's life. Those two pearl-like resplendent teardrops streaked across the vast sky, streaked across the space. One drop entered Jiang Li's body. As for the other drop, it entered the spatial crack and wandered for countless years. In the end, it entered the body of an ordinary mortal youth in the mortal realm. Little Yu. Oh, that's right, Little Yu is still fighting against the God Kings outside. Jiang Lan was suddenly woken up. He had completely woken up from his memories. Huff. Jiang Lan abruptly stood up. After comprehending the time stop, Jiang Lan did not have the ambition to continue to comprehend the time reversal. Firstly, It was because the information regarding the time reversal in the back Earth seal was truly lacking. Secondly, it was because the current Qin Yu was helping him fight against the numerous god kings outside. The Jianglan from before was only able to fight against one or two sage emperors. He was simply unable to resist against the numerous god kings. However, the current Jianglan already possessed astonishing strength. He possessed a first-rate Grand Miss spiritual treasure, and the remarkable ability Time Stop. The current Jianglan was a new Azura God King. Compared to the Azura God King, his strength was not at all inferior. Hopefully I still have time. Whoosh! Jianglan immediately turned into a ray of light and flew out of this palace that Qin Yu had specially constructed for him. He then followed the passageway and returned to the Purple Mystic Mansion. After flying out of the Purple Mystic Mansion, he began to fly toward the location where Qin Yu was fighting against the God Kings. Regardless of whether it was the Azura God King or the Blood Sea Queen. They were all uncompromising toward Qin Yu. Finally they were angered. Although they were afraid of Qin Yu, they were still confident in being able to defeat him if they were to join hands. Brother Luo Fan, the preparations are complete. Jiang Fan directly said via Divine Awareness voice transmission. At this moment, the 8 great sage emperors and the Azura God King had already secretly formed an alliance. They had decided to attack together. The 8 great sage emperors did not ask the Blood Sea Queen for help at all. That was because they did not know how powerful the Blood Sea Queen was. The Blood Sea Queen herself also did not say anything. However, Qin Yu had to be careful of the Blood Sea Queen. Haha! Qin Yu's laughter was extremely joyous. At the same time, it also contained a trace of madness. Qin Yu's gaze swept toward the God Kings. His gaze contained a trace of bloodthirst. It's been a long time since I've had a good massacre. Come. Qin Yu held the divine spear waning snow in his hand. He did not fear the God Kings in the slightest. The 8 great sage emperors, the Azura God King, and them were all extremely careful. However, right at this moment, a burst of air explosion that caused the space to vibrate unceasingly transmitted toward them. A figure was rapidly flying toward the Purple Mystic Mansion in the distance. Qin Yu turned his head around to look. When he saw the person who had arrived, Qin Yu was filled with confusion. Uncle Lan. Chapter 666. Jiang Lan wore a cyan gown and stood on the gauze feather blade. He streaked across the vast sky and rapidly flew toward Qin Yu and the other God Kings. His frightening speed had caused the space to tremble. It's Jiang Lan. Huangfu Liuxiang, who stood beside the 8 great sage emperors, was the first to shout in pleasant surprise. Immediately, the attention of those God Kings all shifted to Jiang Lan, who had suddenly arrived. It's really Jiang Lan. This Jiang Lan actually came out by himself. A pleasantly surprised expression flashed through Duanmu Yen's eyes. The eyes of the Azura God King Luo Fan and the Blood Sea Queen Shui Yin both shined. Their gazes were focused on Jiang Lan, who was rapidly flying over. Both of them were eager to act. The two of them possessed sufficient confidence in taking care of Jiang Lan. Jiang Lan flew to Qin Yu's side. He smiled to Qin Yu and slightly nodded. Little Yu. Qin Yu was confused. Uncle Lan ought to be training in the new cosmos. Why would he come out in such a short period of time? Regardless of whether it was Qin Yu or the other God Kings, they felt that it had only been half a day since they fought over the back Earth seal in the exalted celestial mountain. However, Jiang Lan had actually trained for several tens of years. However, in Qin Yu's heart, even if Uncle Lan had trained for several tens of years, it would still be impossible for him to increase his strength greatly in merely several tens of years. Jiang Lan quickly handed over the back Earth seal. Duanmu Yin was the first to shout. Regardless of whether it was Duanmu Yin or Jiang Lan, the two of them were both ambitious individuals. Otherwise, it would be impossible for the two of them to each lead a battalion and fight against each other in the divine realm for so many years. Both Duanmu Yin and Jiang Lan wanted to become exalted celestials. Naturally, they also wanted to obtain the back Earth seal of the 3 seals. Second brother, hand over the back Earth seal. Otherwise, you'll only harm others and yourself. Jiang Lan said with a cold expression. Jiang Lan took a glance at his big brother Jiang Fan. He then looked to Zhou Hua, Duanmu Yin and the other sage emperors. His expression suddenly turned ugly. That was because Jiang Lan remembered the scene of Zhuo Qiumei being killed by the joint efforts of the several sage emperors. Compared to that scene back then, the scene was extremely similar. It was even a bit larger. You want me to hand the back earth seal? You. Jiang Lan said. Jiang Lan today. Even if you don't want to, you must still hand it over. The Azura God King Luo Fan said coldly. At the same time, a blood ruler appeared in his hand. It was the blood ruler Lifebreaker. Since you've come, don't even think about leaving. The Blood Sea Queen sneered and said. Killing intent flashed in the eyes of the many God Kings. The ordinary God Kings were now filled with confidence. They had no confidence in dealing with Qin Yu. However, against Jiang Lan, once everyone joined hands, even if Jiang Lan were to possess 3 heads and 6 arms, he would still die. Who? 2 sharp auras suddenly rose from the front and back of the room. Only at this moment did the 8 great sage emperors, the Azura God King, the Blood Sea Queen, and the others remember the black-robed Qin Yu standing in front of them, and the azure-robed Qin Yu standing behind them. Kill my Uncle Lan? Let's see if you have that kind of luck. Qin Yu said coldly. The divine spear waning snow in his hand immediately trembled. He was about to attack. However, Jiang Lan beside him extended his hand to stop Qin Yu. Qin Yu was startled. He was completely confused. Why would Uncle Lan stop him? Qin Yu turned around to look at Jiang Lan. Jiang Lan stared at Qin Yu. He smiled and said, Little Yu, these God Kings have come for me. Allow me to handle them. Uncle Lan by yourself? Qin Yu was shocked. Not only Qin Yu, even the God Kings in the distance were puzzled by Jiang Lan's words. They had all experienced Jiang Lan's strength. They also admitted that while Jiang Lan was powerful, he was at the very most comparable to 1 or 2 sage emperors. If he were to face that many God Kings joining hands, then he would undoubtedly be killed. Was this Jiang Lan trying to court death? Many God Kings looked to Jiang Lan in confusion. At this moment, Jiang Lan said to Qin Yu via divine awareness voice transmission. Little Yu, you all have only been outside for half a day. However, I have already trained in the new cosmos for several tens of years. In these several tens of years, my comprehension of the temporal laws has increased. Uncle Lan had already reached the limit of time acceleration. In that case, increasing his comprehension of time acceleration was, in an instant, Qin Yu realized what Jiang Lan meant. However, upon thinking of the answer, Qin Yu felt even more disbelief. In merely several tens of years, Uncle Lan had actually managed to comprehend time stop. In the current divine realm, other than Uncle Lan, only the Azura God King Luo Fan and the Blood Sea Queen Shui Yin had managed to comprehend time stop. One could imagine how difficult it was. Uncle Lan, you really managed to comprehend time stop? Don't doubt me. Jiang Lan smiled as he looked to Qin Yu. He was able to guess what Qin Yu was thinking. Little Yu, when have I ever deceived you? I have indeed managed to comprehend time stop. These people have all come for me. You can just stand aside and watch me attack. If I am truly unable to do it, it would not be too late for you to help me then. Qin Yu hesitated for a moment. However, he still nodded and agreed to it. Good. Uncle Lan, you must be careful. Qin Yu had absolute trust in Jiang Lan. Jiang Lan nodded to Qin Yu with a smile on his face. After that, Qin Yu coldly looked to the 8 great sage emperors and the other God Kings. He humphed coldly, and then flew to the side. The black gown Qin Yu flew to the location where he faced the Azura God King. As for the cyan gown Qin Yu, he also moved. The cyan gown Qin Yu flew to the location near the Blood Sea Queen. When the God Kings saw that Qin Yu and Jiang Lan were exchanging glances with one another, they all guessed that Qin Yu and Jiang Lan ought to be discussing via divine awareness voice transmission. Originally, the God Kings had thought that Qin Yu would stop Jiang Lan and not allow him to throw away his life. However, to their surprise, Qin Yu actually moved to the side. From the looks of it, Qin Yu was actually persuaded by Jiang Lan. Jiang Fan, Zhou Hua and them glanced at each other. Brother Jiang Fan, This second brother of yours actually wants to take care of us by himself? Are you able to understand the reason behind this? Zhou asked Jiang Fan via divine awareness voice transmission. Jiang Fan shook his head. I'm afraid it's because he wants to take responsibility for his own matters. This is the only explanation. Jiang Fan replied. This answer was something that even Jiang Fan himself did not believe. Of the numerous god kings present, not a single one of them had expected that in merely half a day's time, Jiang Lan would turn from an expert, who had only comprehended time acceleration, to a super expert, who had comprehended time stop. At this moment, Jiang Lan was coldly looking at the 8 great sage emperors and them. You all couldn't possibly want the back earth seal, right? If you have the ability to kill me, then you all will naturally be able to obtain the back earth seal. Jiang Lan held the gauze feather blade in his hand and coldly stared at the god kings. The god kings were all communicating with each other via divine awareness. At the same time, they were also looking at Qin Yu. At this moment, Qin Yu's true body, the black gown Qin Yu, was on the opposite side of the Azura god king. As for the cyan gown Qin Yu, he was close to the Blood Sea Queen. Brother Luo Fan, I do not wish to fight against you. I hope that you will not force me to fight against you. Qin Yu looked to the Azura god king. At the same time, he said via divine awareness voice transmission. You merely need to stay there and watch. The Azura god king frowned slightly. He took a glance at Qin Yu. After that, the Azura god king smiled. Why are you so confident in Jiang Lan? The Azura god king ridiculed. Qin Yu lightly smiled and remained silent. Blood Sea Queen, my uncle Lan is fighting against those god kings. I hope that you will not interfere. If you do not interfere, I will also not interfere. If you were to interfere, then I would have no choice but to interfere. Qin Yu said to the Blood Sea Queen via divine awareness voice transmission. As for the clone, the cyan gown Qin Yu, he was firmly staring at the Blood Sea Queen. The Blood Sea Queen Shui Yin felt a burst of anger in her heart. She knew very well how powerful this clone was. The strength of this clone's body was on par with hers. Furthermore, this clone was also capable of teleportation. If they were to truly fight, it would likely be extremely troublesome for her. Humph, if I do not interfere, your uncle Lan would still die. The Blood Sea Queen angrily said via divine awareness voice transmission. In that case, there is no need for you to worry. The black gown Qin Yu and the cyan gown Qin Yu were respectively in a deadlock with the Azura God King and the Blood Sea Queen. As for Jiang Lan, he was facing the 8 great sage emperors and the other god kings. Indecisiveness will only lead to chaos. Attack! Duanmu Yin directly said via divine awareness voice transmission. The other 7 sage emperors all nodded. Then the 8 great sage emperors' great formation suddenly scattered. The 8 great sage emperors were separated into Huangfuyu, Putai Hong, Shintu Yen, Tang Lan and Mu Qin, the 5 sage emperors who respectively controlled the 5 elemental origin energies of metal, wood, water, fire and earth. As for Jiang Fan, Duanmu Yin and Zhou Hua, the 3 sage emperors, the 8 great sage emperors were separated into 2 formations. Huff! Without the slightest hesitation, the 8 great sage emperors immediately attacked Jiang Lan. The person leading the 5 elemental origin great formation was precisely Huangfuyu. With a wave of his hand, a 5-colored blade ray was shot toward Jiang Lan. Jiang Fan, Duanmu Yin and Zhou Hua, the 3 sage emperors also joined hands. With Zhou Hua as the leader, he waved his hand and sent 2 sword-shaped origin energies toward Jiang Lan. This Jiang Lan's strength is much weaker than Qin Yu's. Once he is struck by a single attack, he will likely be seriously injured. Once he is seriously injured, I will be able to directly kill him. A ruthless light flashed through Huangfu Liuxiang's eyes. Not only Huangfu Liuxiang, the other god kings also flew into the sky from the side at the same time. They did not directly face Jiang Lan. Instead, they were flying around him. They were waiting for Jiang Lan to be injured. Once Jiang Lan was injured, they would all rush forward to kill Jiang Lan and seize the back earth seal. Become that fisherman? Jiang Lan lightly laughed. Facing the incoming 5-colored blade ray, he immediately stepped onto the gauze feather blade, and his speed reached its limit. He directly flew to the side in an arc. The five-colored blade ray also turned. Furthermore, the speed of the five-colored blade ray was much faster than Jiang Lan's. Jiang Lan took a turn. The direction he flew to just so happened to be a group of god kings from the Ascender faction. Those ordinary god kings were also separated into different factions. The majority of the Ascender faction's god kings were near each other. The majority of the god kings from the 8 great divine families were near each other. Not good. Jiang Lan is flying over. God King Ao Tun, God King Zxian, God King Feather Sha, God King Tiamiao, God King Universal Law, God King Sun, God King and Sun, God King Lu Lian, God King Sun Lian, and a large number of other god kings who were originally planning to take advantage of the situation were all startled. However, soon after, these god kings from the Ascender faction gathered together and prepared to take care of Jiang Lan. They were not worried. With this many god kings from the Ascender faction, how could they possibly fear a Jiang Lan, who had merely comprehended time acceleration to the pinnacle? These god kings all held their own spiritual treasures. Whoosh! With the five-colored blade ray in front, and the 2 sword rays behind, the speed of these 2 blade rays was much faster than Jiang Lan's. In a blink of an eye, they were about to reach Jiang Lan. And at this moment, Jiang Lan was still several tens of meters away from the Ascender faction's god kings. God King Ao Tun, God King Yu Cha, and them only saw Jiang Lan's lips slightly moving. Suddenly, in an instant, the entire world grew silent. The wind stopped flowing. The clouds stopped drifting. Even the five-colored blade rays and the 2 sword rays that the sage emperors shot out stopped moving forward. Furthermore, not a single one of them was able to move. Seeing the five-colored blade rays that stopped moving forward, the 2 sword rays. Time stop. Jiang Lan was stunned. Zhou Hu was stunned. All of the 8 great sage emperors were stunned. The 10 god kings from the Ascender faction were also stunned. Those hidden god kings all looked at this scene with a stupefied expression. Even the Azura god king Luo Fan and the Blood Sea Queen Shui Yin, who knew time stop, grew silent. In the divine realm, there was another god king that knew how to use time stop. The 10 great god kings from the Ascender faction were unable to move. However, Jiang Lan, who had used time stop, was able to move. PFFF. The blade ray turned into a beautiful curve as it streaked across the vast sky. Jiang Lan's movement was extremely graceful. The gauze feather blade in his hand merely gracefully streaked toward the Ascender faction. However, the 8 great sage emperors instantly reacted. Their origin energy immediately flourished. At the same time, the energy of the god kings from the 10 Ascender faction also increased dramatically. Bang! The airflow once again flowed. Sound once again returned. Even the five-colored blade rays and the 2 sword rays once again flew forward. Time stop had been broken. Merely, in the short moment of time stop, in a blink of an eye, for god kings from the 10 great god kings from the Ascender faction had died, and another god king was seriously injured. At this moment, the blood demon Queen Yu Cha was filled with lingering fear. If it wasn't for the fact that time stop was broken at the last moment, then she would likely have also died. The corpses of the 4 god kings left behind blood in the sky. In the end, they all powerlessly fell to the ground. The 4 god kings that Jiang Lan had killed were God King Ao Tun of the Mount Blood Demon, God King and Sun of the Azura Sea, and God King Universal Law, and God King Sun Yen of the Dual Domain Island. Little N. The Azura god king Luo Fan suddenly roared angrily. As for the black gown Qin Yu, who stood across from the Azura god king Luo Fan, the gaze that he looked to the Azura god king with suddenly grew sharp. His right hand that held the divine spear Waning Snow also suddenly tightened. Chapter 667. The Azura Sea's 4 great god kings was led by the Azura god king Luo Fan. In Luo Fan's heart, that god king and Sun was an extremely loyal younger brother. But now, his younger brother had been killed right under his nose. Annoyance, regret, anger. In an instant, all kinds of chaotic emotions filled the Azura god king Luo Fan's heart. The killing intent in his heart had also soared. Jiang Lan. Luo Fan snarled in his heart. The blood ruler in his hand, life breaker. immediately started to emit a mournful and conspicuous crimson-colored radiance. The blood ruler slowly flew to Luo Fan's feet. Luo Fan was about to step on the blood ruler and chase after Jiang Lan. However, Qin Yu would not allow the Azura God King to go and kill Jiang Lan. Luo Fan's speed instantly reached his limit. He rapidly rushed forward. However, he only managed to rush out 2 to 3 meters. Luo Fan felt as if he had crashed into an incomparably hard boulder. Bang! Luo Fan ruthlessly crashed into the spatial barrier that Qin Yu had formed in an instant. Luo Fan felt a bit dizzy. However, when Luo Fan was about to break through the spatial barrier and rush forward, he discovered front, back, up, down, left, right, there were spatial barriers in all directions. It was as if Luo Fan was trapped in a cage. He was only able to move within a small range of 1 or 2 steps. Qin Yu, it's definitely Qin Yu. Luo Fan immediately thought of Qin Yu. Other than Qin Yu, there was no one else capable of trapping him. The current Luo Fan was like a trapped and enraged lion. Luo Fan angrily turned around and looked at the black-gowned Qin Yu, who was standing in the air not far away. At this moment, Qin Yu was holding the divine spear Waning Snow in his hand and coldly looking at Luo Fan. However, he was not moving at all. Luo Fan, don't forget our agreement from the beginning. Qin Yu's voice sounded in the Azura God King Luo Fan's mind. If you were to attack, then you would be forcing me to attack you. Luo Fan took a deep breath. He stared at Qin Yu with his cold gaze for a long time. Spatial barrier. Luo Fan looked at Qin Yu. His heart gradually calmed down. According to what Luo Fan knew, space had already been frozen. Logically speaking, it was impossible to use the power of space to bind others. However, Qin Yu did it. Furthermore, Luo Fan was simply unable to sense the spatial energy binding him. As a God King who had grasped the laws of space, he was unable to sense the spatial energy. It sounded ridiculous, but it was the truth. These spatial laws are different from the spatial laws of my universe. Qin Yu smiled inwardly. He had enough confidence. Luo Fan looked at the divine spear Waning Snow in Qin Yu's hand. The divine spear Waning Snow had already displayed its astonishing strength more than once. Regardless of whether it was in the Sage Emperor Palace of the North Pole, or when he fought with the Sage Emperors in the South Sea. The power of the divine spear Waning Snow had already been revealed. His attack power should be stronger than mine. Furthermore, he is able to control the special spatial energy to bind me. Furthermore, he is also able to teleport. Luo Fan felt a sharp pain in his heart. Reason told Luo Fan that it was impossible for him to break free from Qin Yu's bindings. Little and I'm sorry, Luo Fan said softly in his heart. In the end, Luo Fan chose to remain silent. If he were to act, it would be useless. Instead, it would cause Qin Yu and the Azura Sea to become complete antagonists. This was something that Luo Fan did not wish to see. As a leader, he must first consider the people that were still alive. Qin Yu, I will not act. Merely, if that Jiang Lan were to attack the people of my Azura Sea again, then we will fight to the death. The Azura God King Luo Fan said via divine awareness voice transmission. Qin Yu nodded with a smile on his face. Rest assured, Uncle Lan will not kill the people of your Azura Sea again. Qin Yu guaranteed via divine awareness voice transmission. After that, Qin Yu's indifferent gaze moved away from the Azura God King's side and looked directly at Jiang Lan. At this moment, there was a trace of blood on the corner of Jiang Lan's mouth. However, his injury was not serious. Qin Yu, who was using his spatial energy to observe the battle, knew very well that this injury was caused by Uncle Lan using his gauze feather blade. Time acceleration and time stop to block the 5-colored blade rays and the 2 sword rays. The might of the origin energy was truly enormous. It's truly marvelous. Qin Yu smiled as he looked at Jiang Lan's attack. Jiang Lan's usage of the flow of time had simply reached the pinnacle of perfection. Wherever Jiang Lan passed by, the flow of time would naturally change unceasingly. As time and space changed, Jiang Lan's speed was also extremely strange. It's extremely difficult for the 8 great sage emperors to catch up to Uncle Lan. Although that Azura God King has also comprehended time stop, his mastery of time acceleration is inferior to Uncle Lan's. Qin Yu evaluated in his heart. Time acceleration. The more times one accelerated, the greater one's attainment in time acceleration. When the time acceleration reached a limit, that would be the limit. A step further would be time stop. As for how to use time acceleration, that would depend on one's experience. For example, one could also accelerate time to 1,000,000 times. However, for some people, they would only rigidly accelerate time to 1,000,000 times. However, Uncle Lon was able to ingeniously change the degree of time acceleration unceasingly to achieve all kinds of ingenious results. This was experience, or in other words, battle talent. At this moment, Jiang Fan, Zhou Hua, Duan Muyin and the rest of the 8 great sage emperors were all feeling extremely complicated. None of them had expected that a super expert comparable to the Azura God King would appear from the 8 great divine families. Time stop. This remarkable ability was something that they wished to possess even in their dreams. However, it had now appeared in Jiang Lan's hands. Second brother. Jiang Fan's heart was filled with all sorts of emotions. Sour, sweet, bitter, and spicy. In the misty sky, several tens of rays of light were unceasingly shuttling back and forth. The trajectory of Jiang Lan's flight was extremely fast and graceful. Although many of the ordinary god kings were afraid of Jiang Lan, when they saw that Jiang Lan was injured by the origin energy attack, they all became greedy and started flying. They were prepared to attack at any moment. Whoosh! Whoosh! Suddenly, Jiang Lan drew a nearly perfect trajectory and directly flew toward Huang Fulei. Huang Fulei's expression changed. He immediately unleashed all of his abilities to frantically attack Jiang Lan. In a single breath he sent out 8 sword rays. At the same time, he rapidly dodged the incoming sword rays. 8 sword rays, this was the limit of Huang Fulei's strongest attack. Like a net, these 8 sword rays blocked Jiang Lan's path. Practically all of the god kings in the surroundings were looking at Jiang Lan. They wanted to see how Jiang Lan would handle these sword rays. In the eyes of those god kings, even if Jiang Lan was not injured, his speed would still decrease a bit. Huff! Jiang Lan lightly smiled. It was as if he did not see the 8 sword rays. As if he had stepped into another parallel space, he actually easily shuttled through the 8 sword rays. He was not injured in the slightest. Stepping into another space? Of course not. None of the god kings present were ordinary people. They were all able to tell that Jiang Lan's usage of time acceleration had reached the pinnacle of perfection. However, the way Jiang Lan passed through the 8 sword rays had caused the distance between him and Huang Fulei to increase. Amazing! Huang Fulei saw Jiang Lan flying away. He was unable to refrain his admiration. Liuxiang, it's best that we withdraw. This Jiang Lan is not easy to deal with, Huang Fulei said to Huang Fuliuxiang via voice transmission. In this confrontation, Huang Fulei had realized the nearly insurmountable gap between him and Jiang Lan. No. Huang Fuliuxiang's gaze was fixed onto Jiang Lan the entire time. Big brother, although that Jiang Lan is powerful, didn't you see that every time he withstood an attack from the origin energy, his injuries would become a bit more serious? Huang Fuliuxiang still did not give up hope. Liuxiang, don't think about it anymore. Didn't you see that Qin Yu was beside you the entire time? The way I see it, if that Jiang Lan is unable to withstand the origin energy, then I reckon that Qin Yu will act to help Jiang Lan. Huang Fulei urged. Qin Yu? Huang Fuliuxiang said confidently. Big brother, didn't you see that Qin Yu is in a deadlock with the Azura God King? It is impossible for Qin Yu to act. Once he acts, the Azura God King will also act. Thus, there is no need for you to consider Qin Yu's situation. Furthermore, that Qin Yu possesses a friendly relationship with us. Even if he were to act, he would likely not kill us. Huang Fulei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You've already tried to kill his Uncle Lan. How could he possibly be lenient toward you? If these words were to be heard by Qin Yu, he would definitely sneer. Whoosh! The sharp whistling sound of the air exploding due to the rapid speed of Jiang Lan's flight began to sound unceasingly. However, the whistling sound suddenly stopped. The sound had actually disappeared once again. Everyone knew that Jiang Lan had used time stop again. Bang! The mournful blade ray was extremely cold. From top to bottom, it streaked across a green-gowned old man. Jiang Lan appeared to have done nothing, and continued to fly forward. Bang! The time-stop disappeared. As for that green-gowned old man who had not moved at all, he suddenly moved. That green-gowned old man's body was directly split into two from his head to his crotch. Whoosh whoosh. His blood, internal organs, large intestines and small intestines all flowed out from his body. After being split into two, he fell from the sky. As for this green-gowned old man's true spirit, it had already been scattered by the blade ray. Another god king had died. Many of the god kings were shocked by this scene and started to worry. Jiang Lan's strength was truly too powerful. Furthermore, he possessed a first-rate grand miss spiritual treasure. Even the 8 great sage emperor's speed was inferior to Jiang Lan's. This dead god king ought to be a hidden god king. Qin Yu took a glance at the green-gowned old man's corpse. Qin Yu was able to guess why Jiang Lan was doing all of this. What Jiang Lan wanted to do was to kill in order to intimidate his enemies. If his enemies were to continue to chase after him, then Jiang Lan would continue to kill them. He would kill them one by one until they trembled in fear, until they lost their confidence. Actually, Jiang Lan was selective in who he wanted to kill. In the 12 quadrillion years since the birth of the divine realm, Jiang Lan belonged to the side of the 8 great divine families. Thus, the majority of the people that had enmity with him were from the Ascender realm. Of course, there were also a few among the 8 great divine families that did not have a good relationship with Jiang Lan. Bang! Jiang Lan once again used the gauze feather blade and time stop to block the 2 5-colored blade rays. However, even with this, Jiang Lan still felt as if his body had been pierced through by lightning. Blood directly rushed out from his throat and flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Jiang Lan's gaze swept through his surroundings. Suddenly, Jiang Lan locked onto Huang Fuliuxiang, who stood not far away. Ever since Jiang Lan had attacked, this Huang Fuliuxiang had been pacing back and forth not far away the entire time. She was prepared to attack at any moment. Huang Fuliuxiang, I have already spared you twice. Jiang Lan's divine awareness voice transmission sounded in Huang Fuliuxiang's mind. Huang Fuliuxiang was startled. Soon after, she saw Jiang Lan turning into a ray of light and directly rushing toward her. In fact, since the beginning, Jiang Lan had 2 opportunities to kill Huang Fuliuxiang. However, Jiang Lan saw that Huang Fuliuxiang belonged to the side of the 8 great divine families. Thus, Jiang Lan had been flying toward another path the entire time and spared her life. However, Jiang Lan discovered that he had spared the god kings of the 8 great divine families. However, other than Duan Muyu, Jiang Xing and a few others, the rest of the god kings of the 8 great divine families were all ready to attack him. Jiang Lan had finally become ruthless. He no longer cared that his opponents were from the 8 great divine families. Huang Fuliuxiang was greatly alarmed. She immediately waved her hand, and several green ribbons flew toward Jiang Lan. A cold light appeared in Jiang Lan's eyes. His lips lightly moved. Time stop. The flying green ribbons stopped flying. As for Huang Fuliuxiang, she also became motionless. Liuxiang, Huang Fulei, who had already retreated far away, was unable to rescue Huang Fuliuxiang in time. He could only watch as Jiang Lan flew past Huang Fuliuxiang with lightning speed. After a while, the time stop disappeared. Huang Fuliuxiang's body powerlessly fell from the sky. Shen Tuyin, Duanmu Rufeng, Putai Tu, Tang Xiang and many other god kings of the 8 great divine families were all shocked. Jiang Lan had finally decided to act ruthlessly against the god kings of the 8 great divine families. Uncle Lan. Seeing this scene, Qin Yu smiled and nodded. Qin Yu had already seen that Jiang Lan's ruthlessness had achieved its goal. Not only the Ascender realm, the hidden god kings, and even the god kings of the 8 great divine families did not dare to approach Jiang Lan. Chapter 668. Whoosh! The god kings of the 8 great divine families all began to rapidly fly far away in all directions. As for the several hidden god kings that had originally followed the 8 great divine families' god kings to fish in troubled waters, they saw that the god kings from the Ascender side and the 8 great divine families god-kings, had all fled far away, and then saw Jiang Lan's rapidly approaching figure. These god-kings also began to flee far away in all directions. In a blink of an eye, there was not a single god-king in the vicinity of Jiang Lan. You should have done this long ago. Zhou Hua had a joyous expression on his face. He immediately waved out sword rays that contained the 3 great origin energies. 3 sword rays flew toward Jiang Lan in succession. As for the leader of the 5 great sage emperors of the 5 elements Great Formation Array, Huang Fuyu, his face appeared to be covered with a layer of frost. His gaze was firmly fixed on Jiang Lan in the distance. Jiang Lan, I'll kill you. At this moment, Huang Fuyu's heart was filled with killing intent. After all, the person that Jiang Lan had killed earlier was his younger sister. Huang Fuyu coldly waved his hand. He waved out 3 5-colored blade rays in succession. This was the limit of the 5 great sage emperors' attacks. The 3 5-colored blade rays rapidly flew toward Jiang Lan. The 3 sword rays and 3 5-colored blade rays attacked Jiang Lan from 2 different directions. Their speed was so fast that it was much faster than Jiang Lan's flying speed. Currently, those god-kings were all far away from Jiang Lan. Thus, Jiang Lan did not have the time to deal with the other god-kings. The situation is a bit bad. Seeing this scene, Qin Yu started to frown. Uncle Lan is still a relatively arrogant person. It would not be too late to save him, after he is about to be unable to withstand the attacks. Qin Yu resisted his impulse, and did not immediately attack. Jiang Lan faced the 3 sword rays, and the 3 5-colored blade rays simultaneously. Time acceleration. Jiang Lan instead slightly accelerated the sword rays, and the blade rays. Merely there were 3 sword rays and 3 5-colored blade rays. There were a total of 6 sword rays. The time acceleration of each of the 6 sword rays was different. This caused the 6 sword rays that were supposed to attack Jiang Lan at the same time to appear in sequence. When the first blade ray approached Jiang Lan, bang! Time stop. Jiang Lan once again used time stop. After that, he directly controlled the gauze feather blade and hacked it onto the blade ray. Immediately, the 5-colored blade ray exploded. Jiang Lan himself stayed far away. However, the explosion of origin power also broke the time stop. Bang! 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 5 loud explosions sounded in succession. In a snap of a finger, Jiang Lan had used the gauze feather blade to break through 5 attacks. Pooh! Jiang Lan suddenly sprayed out a mouthful of blood. His complexion was as pale as paper. Because Jiang Lan had used time acceleration, these 5 attacks were in sequence. This allowed Jiang Lan to not have to face all of the attacks at the same time. However, even though they were separated and blocked 5 times in succession, Jiang Lan was still seriously injured. How could the power of Source be so easily resisted? Even if Jiang Lan possessed a first-rate Grand Miss spiritual treasure, even if he possessed a second-rate Grand Miss spiritual treasure, he would still be seriously injured by a single attack from the 8 great sage emperors. The 8 great sage emperors are truly powerful. Without a first-rate Grand Miss spiritual treasure, even god-kings that have comprehended time stop would not be a match for them. Qin Yu exclaimed in admiration in his heart. Zhou Hua, Huang Fuyu, and the others continued to attack. Several more 5-colored saber lights and sword lights flew out. Even though Jiang Lan had yet to touch it, he was already able to sense the frightening fluctuation of the origin energy within it. The attack power was truly too powerful. Uncle Lan, do you need my help? Qin Yu was unable to refrain himself from sending a divine awareness voice transmission. No need. Jiang Lan's reply was extremely decisive. Qin Yu was so anxious that he started to clench his fist tightly. Currently, all of those ordinary god-kings had fled far away. They were using their divine awareness to watch the battle from afar. Without them being a burden, the 8 great sage emperors were able to attack without any restraint. As for Jiang Lan, he was also unable to kill any more god-kings. Bang! 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 Using the gauze feather blade, Jiang Lan blocked 3 attacks in succession. However, each time he blocked an attack, his complexion would become a bit more pale. After blocking 3 attacks, Jiang Lan's complexion had become unprecedentedly gloomy. However, this time around, there were a total of 6 attacks. Jiang Lan had only managed to block 3 of them. Huang Fuyu and them displayed cruel smiles on their faces. As for Jiang Lan, he was feeling extremely complicated. No matter what, this Jiang Lan was still his Jiang Fan's younger brother. Huff. Qin Yu no longer cared about what Uncle Lan was thinking. He directly used his new cosmos's spatial energy to teleport Jiang Lan to his side. Where's he? Zhou Hua, Duan Muyin, Huang Fuyu and them originally saw that Jiang Lan was about to die. However, at this moment, Jiang Lan had actually disappeared. They began to look to their surroundings. After that, the 8 great sage emperors all saw Jiang Lan beside Qin Yu. Little Yu, thank you. Jiang Lan lightly smiled to Qin Yu. He then flipped his hand and took out a spiritual pellet and swallowed it. Jiang Lan's injury was healing at an extremely fast speed. Fog City was surrounded by fog. Within this endless fog, one could faintly see the 8 great sage emperors standing in the air. Their gowns were fluttering in the wind. The 8 of them stood shoulder to shoulder and coldly looked at Qin Yu and Jiang Lan. Jiang Lan, hand over the back earth seal. Zhou Hua of the 8 great sage emperors shouted angrily. Qin Yu did not have the slightest trace of a smile on his face. His expression was extremely cold. Like an ice blade, his gaze swept past the 8 great sage emperors. Hand over the back earth seal? Zhou Hua, aren't you all a bit too confident? Did you truly think that you 8 great sage emperors are unparalleled? These 8 great sage emperors actually also gave Qin Yu a headache. The clan protection spiritual treasures of the 8 great divine families could be used for both attack and defense. Not only did they protect the body, they also protected the soul. Qin Yu had once used the divine spear Waning Snow to attack a sage emperor. However, even the divine spear Waning Snow was unable to kill a sage emperor with a single strike. Using the divine spear Waning Snow, Qin Yu was able to seriously injure a sage emperor with the first strike and kill a sage emperor with the second strike. However, at this moment, it was not a single sage emperor. Instead, it was 8 sage emperors. It was indeed extremely difficult for Qin Yu to take care of the 8 great sage emperors that were gathered together. Qin Yu, are you able to withstand our attacks? Zhou Hua said with a cold smile. The other 3 god kings of the Thunder Punishment City were all killed by Qin Yu. Thus, Zhou Hua's hatred toward Qin Yu was as deep as the ocean. Ridiculous. Qin Yu glanced at the 8 great sage emperors with an indifferent gaze. I am capable of teleportation. I am able to easily dodge your attacks. What about you all? Under my attacks, even if you don't die, you'll still be seriously injured. The 8 great sage emperors have formed a great formation. How could their defense be something that you can break through? The leader Zhou Hua had a face filled with confidence. Qin Yu was slightly startled. Suddenly, Qin Yu came to a realization. Once the 8 great sage emperors joined hands, their 8 origin energies would complement each other. Not only would their attack power increase enormously, even their defense would increase enormously. It was likely that after the 8 great sage emperors formed a great formation and stood there for him to attack, it would be extremely difficult for him to injure them. Oh, as expected of the 8 great sage emperors. You have some skills. Qin Yu mocked. That Duan Muyin said. Qin Yu, it's good that you understand. Quickly have that Jiang Lan hand over the back earth seal, and we'll forget about today's matter. Otherwise we will. Otherwise what will we do? Tell me, I really want to know. Qin Yu looked to the 8 great sage emperors without the slightest fear. The 8 great sage emperors were stunned. They all knew that Qin Yu was able to teleport when using spatial freezing. However, they were unable to teleport. In this case, even if their attack power was astonishing, how could they possibly injure Qin Yu? Qin Yu, Zhou Hua stood out and said angrily, if you all do not hand over the back earth seal, then our 8 great sage emperors' single aura 8 elements will directly bombard the Fog City and turn the Fog City and your purple mystic mansion into ashes. Qin Yu narrowed his eyes. A cold light leaked out from his narrowed eyes. Boom! The boundless new cosmos spatial energy suddenly bound the 8 great sage emperors. The 8 great sage emperors felt as if they were being wrapped by ropes. They were actually unable to move at all. It's you all who are courting death. Qin Yu said coldly. The expressions of the 8 great sage emperors all took a huge change. They all felt that they were unable to move. Without the slightest hesitation, the 8 of them simultaneously used a special skill of their clan protection spiritual treasures. Buzz! Qin Yu felt that the entire divine realm was shaking. A frightening power burst forth from the 8 great sage emperors. The new cosmos spatial energy that bound the 8 great sage emperors was actually broken apart. The 8 spiritual pearls floating above the 8 great sage emperors started to revolve. The frightening origin energy penetrated through the heaven and earth. The 8 great spiritual pearls had actually completely connected with the origin energy of this cosmos. Qin Yu's new cosmos spatial energy was simply unable to suppress the origin energy of this cosmos. As expected of the 8 great sage emperors, you have some ability. Qin Yu's eyes shined. Immediately after, Qin Yu disappeared into thin air. Wait! Huang Fuyu suddenly shouted in a loud voice. Qin Yu's figure appeared once again. He had already arrived beside the 8 great sage emperors. Qin Yu held the divine spear waning snow and looked to Huang Fuyu. Huang Fuyu, I owe you a favor. Speak, what is it? Huang Fuyu squeezed out a smile to Qin Yu. Qin Yu, let's each take a step back. What do you think? Take a step back. Qin Yu was confused. How do we take a step back? Huang Fuyu exchanged glances with Duanmu Yin and them. After that, Huang Fuyu smiled to Qin Yu and said, how about this? We do not want the back earth seal on Jianglan. However, Jianglan must agree to not fight for the all-people seal. What do you think? Qin Yu was annoyed. At the very most, it'll be the same as the Azura God King. Uncle Lan agrees to not step into the exalted celestial mountain from today until the birth of a new exalted celestial. Qin Yu said coldly. Huang Fuyu and them shook their heads. They were unable to accept this. If this was the case, then even if any of them were to obtain the all-people seal, Jianglan would still be able to wait outside of the relief sculpture tunnel to fight for it. Treating the Azura God King like that, and treating Uncle Lan like this? Looking down on me, looking down on my Uncle Lan? Killing intent lingered on Qin Yu's body. Little you agree to them. Jiang Lan's voice sounded. Agree. Qin Yu turned around and looked to Uncle Lan. Qin Yu was confused. Why must they endure? Qin Yu did not fear these 8 great sage emperors in the slightest. If they wanted to fight, then let's fight. Who would be afraid of who? The 8 great sage emperors wanted to extinguish his fog city. However, could it be that he could not extinguish the Thunder Punishment City, Mount Blazing Flame, Jade Ripple Lake, and the other sacred lands? Jianglan lightly smiled to Qin Yu. He then looked to the 8 great sage emperors. His gaze swept across all of the sage emperors. I, Jianglan, hereby swear to the heavens that as long as the sage emperors do not come to disturb me and the people of the Fog City, I will not go and fight for the all-people seal. Zhou Hua and them glanced at each other. In the end, they all flew away in silence. Through their second encounter with Qin Yu, those god kings and sage emperors had already come to know. The Fog City was inviolable. On the side of the Fog City was Qin Yu and Jianglan. The two of them were both super experts. Even if the 8 great sage emperors were to come together, they would still not be able to do anything to them. Everyone understood that the strongest place in the divine realm was no longer the Azura Sea or the 8 great sacred lands. Instead, it was the Fog City. This battle had consolidated the status of the Fog City. Just like that, Qin Yu and Jianglan watched as the 8 great sage emperors and the various god kings in the distance all left. They finally left. Qin Yu said with a smile, there's still people that haven't left. Jianglan looked to the 2 people beside him. That Azura God King Luo Fan and Blood Sea Queen Shui Yun were both still here. The Azura God King Luo Fan took a deep glance at Jianglan. His gaze contained a trace of killing intent. However, in the end, Luo Fan still turned around and flew away. As for that Blood Sea Queen Shui Yun, she began to fly toward Qin Yu. Qin Yu. The Blood Sea Queen looked to Qin Yu. I hope that you will not contest for the all-people seal with me. In the Blood Sea Queen's heart, since Jianglan and the Azura God King were both unwilling to enter the exalted celestial mountain, then wouldn't the all-people seal be hers? Merely she was still afraid of Qin Yu. Why should I? Qingyu started to laugh. The Blood Sea Queen said coldly, because of the agreement between you and me, if I were to spare Hong Yin and Zixia's lives, you would not disturb me from seizing the All-People Seal. Good. I will definitely not disturb you from seizing the All-People Seal. However, if you do not have the ability to seize the All-People Seal, then it should be fine for me to act. Qingyu said with a smile. The Blood Sea Queen humphed coldly. However, she was still satisfied with Qingyu's reply. From the Blood Sea Queen's point of view, in a situation where the Azura God King, Jianglan and Qinyu were not going to contest for the All-People Seal with her, it was impossible for her to not be able to obtain the All-People Seal. Blood Sea Queen, I have agreed to this matter of yours. However, I also wish to ask you, last time, you had used Zixia and Hong Yun's lives to threaten me for the first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. However, why did you suddenly give up? Qingyu had been puzzled by this question the entire time. Chapter 669. Hearing this question, the Blood Sea Queen Shui Yin raised her eyebrows. A rare smile actually appeared on her face. With a smile on her face, she looked to Qingyu and said, Qingyu, if you truly wish to know the answer, then help me obtain the All-People Seal and I'll tell you. Hearing that, Qingyu wanted to curse out at this Blood Sea Queen. It was merely a simple question, yet this Blood Sea Queen was actually still hiding her answer. Qingyu lightly smiled. Blood Sea Queen, just pretend that I never asked. Uncle Lan, let's return. After that, Qingyu turned around and said to Jianglan beside him. Jianglan also lightly nodded. The two of them turned into two rays of light and flew toward the distant fog city. The Blood Sea Queen watched as Qingyu and Jianglan's figures disappeared into the fog city that was faintly discernible within the fog. Then she laughed softly. Interesting, interesting. After that, the Blood Sea Queen's figure moved and disappeared into the fog. Countless arm-sized lightning bolts pierced through the heaven and earth. In the center of the lightning bolts was a floating city, the Thunder Punishment City. The Thunder Punishment City was exactly the same as it was hundreds of millions of years ago. Merely, of the 4 God Kings in the Thunder Punishment City, 3 had died. Only the Northwest Sage Emperor Zhou remained. Thunder Punishment City. Inside the secluded courtyard that the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial lived in, Zhou walked to the entrance of the courtyard nervously. His heart was filled with worries as he looked to the closed courtyard gate. Zhou paced back and forth for a long time. In the end, he extended his hand to knock on the door. Right after he extended his hand, the courtyard gate opened by itself with a creak sound. Or come in. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's sonorous and powerful voice sounded. Yes, Lord Father. Zhou accepted the order respectfully, and then walked into the courtyard. At this moment, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial was standing in the courtyard with his hands behind his back. His back was facing Zhou. His figure was still that tall and straight. When Zhou saw the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, all of the worries and grievances in his heart surged forth. He immediately bowed mournfully and said, Lord Father, Zhou Ran is also dead. Lord Father, please uphold justice. Zhou was truly powerless. Facing Qingyu, Zhou was completely helpless. The 8 great sage emperors were powerful. Even when facing the Azura God King, they were still able to intimidate the Azura God King. But facing Qingyu, it would be difficult to even injure Qingyu. However, this time around, Jianglan's strength had actually increased abruptly. He had become a super expert comparable to the Azura God King. The current Fog City possessed 2 super experts, Qingyu and Jianglan. Even if the 8 great sage emperors went together, they would not be able to do anything to the other party. He had no choice but to admit that the current Fog City was definitely the #1 power in the divine world. If he wanted to take revenge, he could only rely on his father, Empyrean Thunder Punishment. Or don't worry. Empyrean Thunder Punishment indifferently said. There was no anger in his voice at all. Then, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial turned around. His hawk-like eyes looked to Zhou. With the descent of the Exalted Celestial Mountain this time around, your father and I have also been restricted greatly. Father. Hearing what the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial said, Zhou felt a burst of pain. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's gaze was clear and cold. He said indifferently, there is no need for you to be in too much pain. Those that have died should just die. Those that are still alive should still be alive. You still have a son now. Zhou Xian's generation still has many descendants. Zhou restrained his emotions and stood respectfully to the side. Now that the Exalted Celestial Mountain has descended, regardless of whether it is me or the other Exalted Celestials, none of us are allowed to act as we wish. Now, I shall allow that Qinyu to be free and unfettered for several tens of years. A cold light flashed through the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's hawk-like eyes. When the new Exalted Celestial is born, it will be the time for my origin sin sword to judge his crimes. Although the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial was an Exalted Celestial, he still had some concerns in his heart. His third son, Zhou Yan, was also known as Zhou Wulian. He was the son that the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial was extremely fond of. Zhou Wulian's death had caused the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial to hate Qinyu to the bones. Merely, his eldest martial brother, the Floating Feathers Exalted Celestial's words were still in his ears. Junior brother, according to the rules, from the time when the Exalted Celestial Mountain descends until the new Exalted Celestial is born, you only have a single opportunity to attack. As for that opportunity, you've already promised to give it to Jiang Fan. Now that the Exalted Celestial Mountain has already descended, if you were to attack Qinyu now, you would be violating the rules. In that case, I can only represent my master and carry out the rules of the heavens and directly obliterate you. Obliterate. Directly obliterate. Just thinking about it, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's heart started to tremble. The Floating Feathers Exalted Celestial was never one to joke around. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial knew this very well. He was extremely certain that if he were to truly attack Qinyu, then the Floating Feathers Exalted Celestial would likely kill him before he could even kill Qinyu. Whether or not the Floating Feathers Exalted Celestial possessed the ability to kill him, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial did not doubt this at all. We can only wait. Wait until the new Exalted Celestial is born. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial narrowed his eyes. The red mole between his brows became even brighter and more beautiful. The day when the new Exalted Celestial is born is the day Qinyu dies. Actually, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial had another opportunity to take care of Qinyu. It was the time when Jiang Fan requested his help. When Jiang Fan requested his help, if Qinyu were to coincidentally go to seize the treasure at that time, then he would have a reason to openly kill Qinyu. Merely, if Qinyu were to not go to seize the treasure, and instead stay in the Fog City peacefully, then he, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, would not have a reason to kill Qinyu. Fog City. Inside the Purple Mystic Mansion, on top of the vast and mighty inner lake, with a circumference of 100 miles, numerous pavilions were located on the surface of the lake. A winding path connected the pavilions and ran through the entire inner lake. Qinyu and Jiangli were slowly walking on this path and looking at the surging lake water. It had already been a year or two since the battle for the Back Earth Seal. In these 2 years, Qinyu had lived a very comfortable life. Brother Yu, how come I haven't seen Xiaohei in these past couple months? Jiangli asked in a slightly puzzled manner. In the Purple Mystic Mansion, Qinyu would frequently be together with Xiaohei and Hofei. Jiangli would also frequently be together with Bai Ling and Zixia. Thus, Jiangli would also frequently see Hofei and Kuro. However, in recent days, Jiangli had never seen Kuro. Oh, you're talking about Xiaohei? Qinyu couldn't help but recall the scene from several months ago. At that time, Qinyu was chatting with Kuro and Hofei about the various divine kings of the divine realm. However, Kuro suddenly stopped talking. When Qinyu and Hofei looked at Kuro in puzzlement, Kuro was startled for a moment. Then, he immediately said to Qinyu and Hofei, "Big brother monkey, as I said earlier, I seem to have comprehended something. I'm preparing to go into seclusion immediately." After saying that, Kuro didn't waste any time. With a movement of his body, He disappeared before Qin Yu and Ho Fei's eyes. Li Er. I think Xiao He must have comprehended something. That's why he's going into seclusion. Who knows? Xiao He might be able to reach the Divine King realm this time. Qin Yu said with a smile. Jiang Li nodded. Xiao Shuang is here. Jiang Li suddenly saw that in a pavilion far away, Qin Shuang was jumping up and down while shouting loudly. Father, mother, father, mother. This Qin Shuang was shouting happily and running very fast. When Jiang Li saw her son, she couldn't help but smile so brightly that her eyes narrowed. She immediately walked over happily. Qin Yu also smiled and walked over. However, after taking 2 steps, Qin Yu's expression changed. Li Er. Qin Yu suddenly shouted. Jiang Li couldn't help but turn her head to look at Qin Yu in surprise. Her eyes were filled with puzzlement. Qin Yu raised his eyebrows and smiled strangely. Li Er. It seems that I will have to go into seclusion for 10 days to half a month. Seclusion? Brother Yu, you are going into seclusion? Jiang Li was puzzled. The second layer of the Neoverse is about to be completed, Qin Yu said with a smile. When Jiang Li heard this, she couldn't help but reveal a look of joy. Ah, that's great. Brother Yu, once the second layer of the Neoverse is completed, how much will your power increase? Jiang Li wasn't too sure about this. I will tell you when I return. I will go to the Neoverse first, Qin Yu said. Okay. Jiang Li picked up Qin Shuang, who had already run over, and nodded at Qin Yu. Father, are you leaving? Qin Shuang's black eyes looked at Qin Yu with confusion. Qin Yu smiled and patted Qin Shuang's head. In 10 days to half a month, I will be back. After that, Qin Yu looked at Jiang Li. Then he disappeared from the inner lake. Chapter 670. The first layer of the mortal realms universe. The first layer of the immortal devil and demon realms energy level. Now in this vast universe, the first and second levels had been perfected. Countless spaces transmitted the power of space and time to each other. The power of the origin of the universe is also in different spaces. Chi. Endless grand mist energy continued to fuse into the new universe from the grand mist space. At the very top of the new universe, the new divine world also began to slowly evolve. This was the final level. When the new divine world was completed, the new universe could be considered to have reached large success. Qin Yu, who was sitting cross-legged in space, opened his eyes and frowned slightly. With a thought, Qin Yu disappeared from the space and returned to the purple mystic mansion in the divine world's fog city. Qin Yu stood on the surface of the purple mystic mansion's inner lake. Freeze! Qin Yu said softly. With Qin Yu as the center, the flow of time within a radius of a few kilometers seemed to come to a sudden halt. The undulating waters of the lake became still. The surrounding sounds all disappeared. A silent world, a silent world. Except for Qin Yu, everything in this small area was still. I've succeeded in the second layer of the cosmos. In this divine realm, I am finally able to use time stop. Qin Yu was also slightly excited. In the new cosmos, Qin Yu was the ruler. In the God realm, Qin Yu was not invincible. Time stop. The time stop I used was different from the time stop used by the Azura God King and Uncle Lan. Qin Yu had a smile on his face. Qin Yu's time stop used the Neoverse time power. Spatial pressure is useless against God Kings who have comprehended the laws of space. The same principle applies to God Kings who have comprehended time stop. Time stop won't have much of an effect either. Qin Yu was very clear. Regardless of whether it was Jiang Lan, the Azura God King or the Blood Sea Queen, their time stop was only effective against the 8 great sage emperors and the other God Kings. However, Jiang Lan was unable to use his time stop to stop the Azura God King. This was because the 3 of them had all comprehended time stop. After comprehending this move, it was naturally ineffective against them. They are not afraid of the time stop that originated from the temporal laws of the divine realms universe, but they are afraid of my time stop. Qin Yu grew even more confident. Once he used time stop, even the Azura God King and the Blood Sea Queen would not be able to move in the slightest. The Azura God King and the Blood Sea Queen would not be able to use their comprehension of the temporal laws to break through this attack. They could only force their way through. It would take a lot of time to break through with brute force. That amount of time was enough for Qinyu to kill them all. The Blood Sea Queen is capable of transforming into her true form. However, with time stop, you simply do not have the opportunity to transform into your true form. Qinyu smiled indifferently. Now that he was able to use time stop, Qinyu's strength had definitely surpassed that of the Azura God King and the Blood Sea Queen. In the entire divine realm, likely, only the exalted celestials were capable of causing Qinyu to fear them. Brother Yu. Jiang Li's voice suddenly sounded from afar. Qinyu turned around to look. He saw that Jiang Li was gathered together with Qin Shuang, Qin Si and some others on the shore of the inner lake. Qinyu knew that those people were all his relatives, brothers and friends. In order to protect one's relatives and friends, one must possess sufficient strength. The stronger one was, the more peaceful and happy one would be. Time passed. In a blink of an eye, 7 or 8 years had passed. However, Kuro was still in seclusion training. After such a long time, the people of the Purple Mystic Mansion started to pay attention to the exalted celestial mountain. Many people of the Purple Mystic Mansion would frequently go to the shore of the inner lake to look at the water screen. Through the water screen, they were carefully looking at the situation on the exalted celestial mountain. According to the time, the all-people seal ought to be about to appear. On the exalted celestial mountain, currently, the number of god kings on the exalted celestial mountain was much less than when the exalted celestial mountain had descended. The Azura God King and Jiang Lan had killed over 10 god kings in their 2 ruthless attacks. Currently, there were only 20+ god kings here. Brother Jiang Fan, do we not need to discuss how to contest for the all-people seal? Shen Tuyen walked over to Jiang Fan and asked via divine awareness voice transmission. Shen Tuyen possessed a very good relationship with Jiang Fan. Last time, Jiang Fan had asked Shen Tuyen and Zhou Hua to help him contest for the Back Earth seal. Furthermore, he had made a lot of plans. However, this time around, Jiang Fan had actually not sought out Shen Tuyen to discuss the matter. Jiang Fan, who was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, opened his eyes. Brother Shintu, there is no need for you to do anything this time around. You can just quietly watch from the side. Jiang Fan said with a smile. Jiang Fan's smile was tranquil and dull. However, his dull tone contained absolute confidence. In Jiang Fan's eyes, that all-people seal was already his. Brother Jiang, you're this confident? Shen Tuyen looked to Jiang Fan with a smile. Jiang Fan smiled mysteriously. He did not bother to explain. Brother Shintu, let's quietly wait for the birth of the all-people seal. As he said that, Jiang Fan's gaze was cast toward the spiritual treasure origin cauldron in the middle of the ravine. The all-people seal is definitely mine. Jiang Fan's voice was that resolute. For the sake of the all-people seal, how much had he Jiang Fan given up? For the sake of obtaining the all-people seal with 100% certainty, he had given up his daughter and his brotherly affection. That Qinyu, who might have been his helper, had also been pushed to the opposite side by him. All of this was because he had obtained the help of the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. After giving up so much, although Jiang Fan was slightly unreconciled, if Jiang Fan were to make a choice again, he would still make the same choice. That was because the Exalted Celestials were absolutely foolproof. Jiang Fan swept his gaze over the surrounding sage emperors and god kings. He displayed a cold smile on his face. The majority of these god kings were all greedy for the all-people seal. They all wanted to be like the unfettered god king from back then and become the new Exalted Celestial. In order to become the new Exalted Celestial, those god kings were all willing to take risks. None of you will be able to win against me, Jiang Fan said softly in his heart. The Blood Sea Queen was proudly standing at the corner of the ravine. Regardless of which god king it was, the Blood Sea Queen did not bother to pay attention to them. I am Duanmu Yin. You might be. The utmost South Sage Emperor Duanmu Yin walked over with a smile on his face. Duanmu Yin also possessed ambitions for the all-people seal. From his point of view, now that Jiang Lan and the Azura God King were both not present, he possessed a very large possibility of obtaining the all-people seal. Humph. The Blood Sea Queen took a glance at Duan Muyin. She did not say anything. Duan Muyin's eyelids jumped. He laughed dryly, and then tactfully left. However, Duan Muyin remembered this Blood Sea Queen in his heart. To dare to treat him like this, she at least possessed sufficient strength. All People's Seal. The Blood Sea Queen looked to the spiritual treasure origin cauldron. Her eyes were filled with anticipation. Unfettered. Last time you became an exalted celestial. This time it should be my turn. It had been over 10 years since the last time the Back Earth Seal appeared. Currently, the All People's Seal from the spiritual treasure origin cauldron could appear at any moment. Thus, none of the God Kings dared to lower their guard. In terms of being the most relaxed, it would likely be Jiang Fan. There were this many God Kings inside the exalted celestial mountain. However, outside the exalted celestial mountain, there was also a God King quietly waiting. If my guess is correct, among the 3 People's Seals, this All People's Seal ought to contain the majority of the contents of time reversal. The Azura God King Luo Fan stood on a small boat and looked to the entrance of the relief sculpture tunnel. After training for all these years, Luo Fan's greatest desire was likely to become the utmost exalted celestial. Time passed by day after day. The 20-plus God Kings inside the exalted celestial mountain and the God King outside the exalted celestial mountain were all quietly waiting. After about half a year had passed, boom! All of a sudden, countless claps of thunder rumbled in the sky, echoing throughout the entire God realm. What's going on? The Azura God King Luo Fan raised his head in confusion. At the same time, he spread his divine awareness in all directions. Many of the God Kings on the exalted celestial mountain also heard the rumbling thunder. For example, Duan Muyin, Jiang Xing, and the other God Kings directly walked out of the relief sculpture tunnel. Even Jiang Fan walked out of the relief sculpture tunnel. Oh, brother Luo Fan. Jiang Fan, who walked out of the relief sculpture tunnel, saw the Azura God King Luo Fan and greeted him with a smile. Jiang Fan did not care about Luo Fan's existence in the slightest. Luo Fan also slightly nodded to Jiang Fan. Brother Jiang Fan, look at this thunder. Furthermore, there are countless 7-colored clouds floating in the sky above the fog city. Could it be that another God King has appeared in this fog city? Jiang Fan's divine awareness also instantly discovered that there were 7-colored clouds floating in the sky above the fog city. Lightning filled the sky. In the sky above the fog city, this newly born God King is naturally from the fog city. Jiang Fan said very indifferently. Although his tone was indifferent, Jiang Fan's heart violently twitched. The strength of this fog city was truly too powerful. When the thunder gradually disappeared, the God Kings all prepared to enter the relief sculpture tunnel and return to the exalted celestial mountain. However, right at this moment, rumble, the entire divine realm was once again filled with the sound of thunder. Many of the God Kings were startled. Generally, the divine realm would only give birth to a God King after a very long period of time. However, now, it seemed that another God King had been born. The time when the 2 God Kings were born was actually almost the same. At this moment, even the close to 10 God Kings that had stayed in the exalted celestial mountain the entire time also came out. 2 God Kings. In a short period of time, 2 God Kings were actually born. This seems to be the first time since the birth of the divine realm. Shen Tuyen exclaimed in admiration. 2 God Kings were born. The first one is from the fog city. As for the second one, it's actually from the thunder punishment city. Duan Muyin displayed an expression of shock. These God Kings immediately discovered that an endless amount of 7-colored clouds had also appeared in the sky above the thunder punishment city. Brother Zhou Hua, congratulations. Duan Muyin immediately turned around and cupped his hands toward Zhou Hua with a smile on his face. Zhou Hua was also slightly stunned. Soon after, he revealed an expression of pleasant surprise. Then he cupped his hands toward the surrounding God Kings and said, "Everyone, I will be returning first." After Zhou Hua finished saying those words, he did not bother to waste any more time. With a teleportation, he disappeared from the line of sight of the God Kings. Inside the Thunder Punishment City, inside the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's secluded little courtyard. At this moment, Zhou Xian was present. Haha, Xian are good. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, who used to be cold and callous, had a joyous expression on his face. He was laughing heartily. Zhou Xian stood to the side with a light smile on his face. Last time, Zhou Xian had decided to enter closed-door training and not come out until he reached the God King level. Never did he expect that after training for so many years, he would actually really reach the God King level. However, after coming out, Zhou Xian came to know that 3 of the 4 great God Kings of the Thunder Punishment City had died. Zhou Xian did not understand why his grandfather did not kill Qin Yu for revenge. Grandfather, that Qin Yu. It's enough. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial extended his hand to stop Zhou Xian. During the time when the Exalted Celestial Mountain descends, Grandfather is also unable to casually attack. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial was extremely fond of Zhou Xian. Among all the descendants of the Zhou clan, the ones that the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial truly liked were Zhou Wulian and Zhou Xian. That was because Zhou Xian was his first grandson. When Zhou Xian was born, he had given Zhou Xian a talisman seal that he had spent a great amount of effort to craft. That talisman seal was capable of helping Zhou Xian block the attacks of first-rate Grand spiritual treasures. Merely from this, one could tell how much the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial liked Zhou Xian. Lord Father. Zhou Hu walked in from the courtyard. Once he entered, he immediately shouted respectfully. However, Zhou Hu had a joyous expression on his face. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial smiled and nodded. Right now is the important time for the birth of the All-People Seal. You actually also came back. However, that's nothing much. This All-People Seal belongs to Jiang Fan. Zhou Hu also nodded. Even the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial was going to personally attack. Who could possibly stop the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial? This All-People Seal would naturally belong to Jiang Fan. Grandfather, at the time when I reached the God King level, there seemed to be another person that had also become a God King. It was someone from the Fog City. Grandfather, do you know who it was? Zhou Xian asked. Zhou Xian possessed an intense curiosity toward the person that had become a God King at the same time as him. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's expression slightly sunk. He coldly humphed and said, "It's that Qin Yu's brother Kuro." Kuro? Zhou Xian immediately remembered. He knew about Qin Yu very well. He knew that Kuro was also the same as Qin Yu, someone who had cultivated step by step from the mortal realm. Even this Qin Yu's brother, a mongrel bird, has such a fast cultivation speed. Zhou Xian was unable to refrain himself from feeling even more jealousy. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial suddenly raised his brows. He seemed to have sensed something. The All-People Seal is about to be born. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial said in surprise. It's about to be born? Zhou Hua and Zhou Xian were both startled. After that, the two of them clasped their hands to the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, and then took their leave. After that, the two of them directly left the courtyard and teleported to the Exalted Celestial Mountain. Chapter 671. Within the Purple Mystic Mansion, the 100-mile-wide lake's surface undulated as it gently slapped against the shore. On the lakeside, more than 100 people of the Qin clan sat around the table casually. Initially, this group of people were chatting and laughing with each other, but suddenly, the spiritual treasure origin cauldron has lit up. Qin Si's surprised voice rang out. Immediately, over 100 people turned their heads to look at the water screen in the sky. Everyone was unable to take their eyes off it, and held their breaths. This is the last exciting show. Qin Yu smiled as he sipped his tea and watched. This time around, none of the God Kings from the Fog City had gone. That was because Jiang Lan had already vowed that he would no longer fight for the All-People Seal. Jiang Lan did not go. The God King of Death Zhuo Qiulin and Yifeng also did not go. At this moment, Qin Yu, Jiang Li Kuro, Jiang Lan, Zhuo Qiulin and Yifeng, this group of God Kings from the Fog City were all drinking tea and watching the show through the water screen. The atmosphere in Fog City was relaxed. But at this moment, the atmosphere in Exalted Celestial Mountain was extremely tense. Swish! Two figures appeared out of thin air outside the Exalted Celestial Mountain's relief sculpture tunnel. They were precisely the Northwest Sage Emperor, Zhou Hua, and Zhou Xian, who had just become a God King. Once the two of them appeared, they immediately noticed the Azura God King Luo Fan, who was not far away. Zhou Hua and Zhou Xian looked at each other with a smile in their eyes. They all knew very well that the Azura God King Luo Fan was destined to fail this time around. If the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial were to act, who could possibly stop him? The All-People Seal was definitely going to be Jiang Fan's. Oh, the Azura God King also noticed this pair of father and son. He couldn't help but chuckle. Zhou Hua and Zhou Xian directly entered the relief sculpture tunnel. After entering the relief sculpture tunnel, the two of them ran at an extremely fast speed. This relief sculpture tunnel was also very strange. It was impossible to teleport or fly. Xian after we enter the Exalted Celestial Mountain, you are to obediently stay beside me and brother Jiang Fan. Do not go and fight for the All-People Seal. Just let those people fight for the All-People Seal for a while. Zhou Hua instructed. I understand. Zhou Xian also had a smile on his face. When grandfather takes action, what kind of expression will those godly kings, who originally thought they would obtain the All-People Seal, have? I'm looking forward to it. Zhou Hua also laughed. Although the father and son were talking, their speed was not slow at all. In an instant, they had entered the Exalted Celestial Mountain. When they entered the Exalted Celestial Mountain, there just so happened to be a Sage Emperor, who used spatial freezing. Although Zhou Hua and Zhou Xian were at the foot of the Exalted Celestial Mountain, they were still able to see a bright light in the middle of the valley. Clearly, the numinous treasure origin cauldron had lit up. In the canyon, the Blood Sea Queen, Ma Tian, and several other hidden god kings, several god kings from the Ascender faction, as well as more than 10 god kings from the 8 great divine families, led by the 8 great sage emperors. When the spiritual treasure origin cauldron lit up, the ones who reacted the fastest were 2 groups of people. All-People Seal. Duanmu Yun's eyes lit up, and he took the lead to soar into the sky. Mu Qin and Tang Lan followed closely behind. The 3 of them did not hesitate at all, as they directly flew towards the spiritual treasure origin cauldron. Other than that, there was also Huang Fuyu and Putai Hong. When Huang Fuyu and Putai Hong saw the bright light above the spiritual treasure origin cauldron, they too rushed up without hesitation. Fight, fight! Jiang Fan was still calmly standing on the flat ground of the canyon. He merely raised his head and looked at the various sage emperors that had soared into the sky to fight for the All-People Seal. It was so much so that Jiang Fan even added more power and used spatial freezing to increase the degree of spatial freezing. Whoosh! Suddenly, a golden ray of light soared into the sky from the spiritual treasure origin cauldron. Right after that golden ray of light came out from the spiritual treasure origin cauldron, it naturally emitted a boundless oppressive aura. Merely by sensing its aura, it was clearly superior to the Blue Sky Seal and the Back Earth Seal. It would seem that the 8 great sage emperors are not united. Let's fight first. I'll act when both sides are seriously injured. The Blood Sea Queen was calmly watching this scene from the side. She was not worried at all. In the entire Exalted Celestial Mountain, there was not a single God King that could cause her to fear. As long as the 8 great sage emperors were not united and fought until both sides were seriously injured, it would be even easier for her, the Blood Sea Queen, to obtain the All-People Seal. The golden ray of light was rapidly shot out. Duanmu Yun's figure moved. He was actually the first to approach that golden ray of light. Duanmu Yun looked at the All-People Seal before him. His gaze was blazing. The source energy of the light origin spiritual pearl above his head was immediately agitated. Duanmu Yun's hand was naturally covered with a layer of source energy. He formed a claw with his hand and directly grabbed at the golden ray of light. Bang! Duanmu Yun felt a burst of intense vibration in his palm. He only managed to calm down after that. Duanmu Yun only had the time to take a glance at his palm. It was a golden seal. There were 3 very special characters on it. He did not recognize those characters at all. However, when he saw those 3 characters, the words "all people seal" naturally appeared in his mind. "Brother Duanmu, be careful," Mu Qin shouted through divine awareness voice transmission. Duanmu Yin immediately grew alert. He saw an enormous golden hand directly grabbing at his hand. Duanmu Yin was immediately able to tell that the enormous golden hand was the hand formed by the Huangfu clan's metal source energy. "Brother Huangfu, this all-people seal is mine. You should give up on it." Duanmu Yin smiled and said via voice transmission. He immediately rushed toward the foot of the exalted celestial mountain. "Humph, Brother Duanmu. It's still too early to say who the all-people seal is." Huang Fuyu and Putai Hong immediately caught up to him. Mu Qin and Tang Lan also chased after Huang Fuyu and Putai Hong from behind. 5 rays of light rapidly flew toward the foot of the exalted celestial mountain. After these 5 rays of light, the God Kings from the Ascender powers, the hidden God Kings, Jiang Xing, Duanmu Yu and many other God Kings who were watching also rapidly chased after them. "You want to catch up to me with merely speed? We 8 great sage emperors are about the same." Duanmu Yin paid attention to Huang Fuyu behind him with his divine awareness. He had a confident smile on his face. The speed of the 8 great sage emperors was about the same. Huang Fuyu was simply unable to catch up to him. However, right when Duanmu Yin was rapidly flying toward the entrance of the relief sculpture tunnel at the foot of the exalted celestial mountain, he suddenly discovered that 2 people were flying toward him. Duanmu Yin instantly recognized them. "Zhou Hua, not good. What a cunning Jiang Fan. He actually sent people to intercept me here." Duanmu Yin's heart immediately tightened. Duanmu Yin and Huang Fuyu both knew that Jiang Fan, Zhou Hua, and Shen Tuyen belonged to the same faction. Earlier, when the all-people seal appeared, that Jiang Fan actually did not go and fight for it. Duanmu Yin had been confused the entire time. At this moment, when he saw Zhou Hua flying toward him from below, he immediately came to a realization. "Zhou Hua, you think you can stop me?" Duanmu Yin shouted angrily via divine awareness voice transmission. Zhou Hua was confused by this angry shout through divine sense voice transmission. "Stop him." Zhou Hua and Zhou Xian had flown back from below, so that they could watch the scene of others fighting over the all-people seal. Never had they expected that they would be confused by this Duanmu Yin. However, Zhou Hua's reaction was also very fast. "Xianer, let's avoid him." Zhou Hua immediately said to Zhou Xian via divine awareness voice transmission. "Yes, father." Zhou Xian also knew his father's intention. Zhou Hua and Zhou Xian streaked across the sky in an arc, and directly turned to the side to avoid Duanmu Yin. They allowed Duanmu Yin to continue to fly downward. They did not stop him at all. Duanmu Yin was confused. However, although he was confused, he still continued to rapidly fly downward. Zhou Hua and Zhou Xian immediately saw Jiang Fan, Shen Tuyen and them who were not in a hurry to fly. Zhou Hua immediately joined Jiang Fan. Strange, could it be that this Huang Fuyu is planning to allow Duanmu Yin to escape like this? Jiang Fan said with a light smile. "I'm afraid that Huang Fuyu had thought that we would stop him earlier. Thus he did not truly attack." Zhou Hua thought for a moment and said. Jiang Fan also nodded in agreement with what Zhou Hua said. Indeed, Huang Fuyu had already discovered Zhou Hua flying over from below. He had thought that Zhou Hua would try to stop him. However, unexpectedly, Zhou Hua did not try to stop him, and instead moved to the side. This Duanmu Yin couldn't possibly have thought that he would be able to fly away so easily, right? Immediately after, with an intention from Huang Fuyu. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. In a single breath, over 100 golden rays of light were shot toward Duanmu Yin. Each and every golden ray of light contained the gold origin energy. Their attack power was extremely astonishing. No matter what, this Duanmu Yin would not allow himself to be attacked by the gold origin energy. Huff! The white light on the surface of Duanmu Yin's body started to shine brightly. The light origin energy formed a protective layer around his body. At the same time, Duanmu Yin was rapidly drifting and dodging the numerous golden rays of light. Even if 1 or 2 of the attacks were to reach him, he would still be able to block them with his defense. However, The over 100 golden rays of light that were dodged by Duanmu Yin suddenly turned into over 100 golden ribbons. These over 100 golden ribbons actually formed an enormous golden net. The enormous golden net just so happened to block Duanmu Yin's path. Not good. What a cunning Huangfu! When Duanmu Yin saw the golden net, he immediately realized that he would not be able to escape by flying. The golden net could not be broken through by attacks alone. Furthermore, if he wanted to dodge to the side, how could his flying speed possibly compare to the golden net formed by the origin energy? Duanmu Yin stopped. Brother Huangfu, are you truly forcing me to attack you? Shouted Duanmu Yin via divine awareness voice transmission. Immediately after, several tens of white-colored whips of light appeared in his hand. Each of the whips of light were over 100 meters long and as thick as an arm. The several tens of white-colored whips of light immediately lashed toward Huangfu. Faced with this attack, Huangfu's expression changed. Golden origin energy immediately appeared on the surface of his body as he rapidly dodged the whips of light. However, those whips of light were over 100 meters long, with several tens of whips lashing out at the same time. How could he possibly dodge them? The whips of light were so random and ruthless. As for Huangfu, it was as if he was hiding in a golden eggshell as he allowed the whips of light to strike him. Bang! 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 A series of collisions between the light origin energy and the metal origin energy sounded. Fortunately, the metal origin energy was more proficient in defense. Faced with the several tens of whips of light, it only caused the blood in its body to tremble. Duanmu Yin put away the whips of light. Brother Huangfu, you also wish to contend against me? Duanmu Yin had a face filled with confidence. Huff, huff, huff. At this moment, the God Kings behind all flew over. Mu Qin and Tang Lan, the two great God Kings, flew over to Duanmu Yin's side. Pu Taihong also flew over to Duanmu Yin's side. The other sage emperors and God Kings all flew to the side and quietly watched the show. As for the Blood Sea Queen, who had a cold expression the entire time, she was also quietly standing to the side. The sage emperors present simply did not know that this Blood Sea Queen was also capable of time stop. After all, the Blood Sea Queen had never used this technique before them before. Brother Mu Qin and sister Tang Lan, it is extremely easy for me to contain the two of you. Thus I am naturally able to easily leave. Duanmu Yin said as he looked to Huangfu. Huangfu and Pu Taihong slightly frowned. They only had 2 people. However, Duanmu Yin had 3 people. Brother Jiang Fan. Huangfu looked to Jiang Fan. However, right when he opened his mouth, Jiang Fan smiled and said, "While you all are competing, I merely need to watch from the side. There is no need for you all to involve me." Huangfu was immediately speechless. These words were too absolute. It was clear that Jiang Fan was not going to interfere. As for the hidden God Kings and Ascender God Kings, who had experienced the massacre of the Azura God King and Jiang Fan twice in succession, they all did not rashly interfere. They all knew that unless it was the best opportunity, they would definitely not interfere. Survival was the most important. Huangfu looked to Duanmu Yin. He then looked to Tang Lan and Mu Qin, who stood beside Duanmu Yin. Tang Lan controlled the water origin energy. Mu Qin controlled the wood origin energy. The two of them were both people who specialized in defense and trapping others. These 2 people were definitely capable of easily containing Huangfu and Pu Taihong. Brother Duanmu, you should leave. I'll watch you leave. I do not believe that you'll be able to safely return to the Lightlands city. Remember, there's still an Azura God King outside. Huangfu humphed and said, "Brother Huangfu, there's no need for you to worry about me. I have my own methods." Duanmu Yin lightly laughed. He then took a glance at the surrounding God Kings. In the end, he smiled and flew toward the foot of the exalted celestial mountain. Duanmu Yin was very proud of himself. He was actually able to leave with the all-people seal so easily. They actually didn't fight. Truly disappointing. The Blood Sea Queen muttered to herself. At this moment, the Blood Sea Queen, who had been at the corner, finally acted. With a wave of her sleeve, a crimson-colored wave of water surged toward Duanmu Yin. The speed of that wave of water was extremely fast. In a blink of an eye, it had arrived before Duanmu. Humph! Duanmu was about to utilize his cosmic origin energy. However, he suddenly discovered, other than that crimson-colored wave of water that could move, the surrounding airflow had all stopped. Even he himself was unable to move. It was as if his cosmic origin energy had been restricted and was unable to move. Time stop. Duanmu complexion immediately turned pale. It was so pale that there was no trace of blood. Chapter 672. How could someone use time stop? That's impossible. Neither Jianglan nor the Azura God King are here. Duanmu was extremely anxious. He was extremely terrified. Time stop. Time stop had only trapped him. He was merely a sage emperor. If the 8 great sage emperors were to join hands, they would definitely be able to use their powerful origin energy to forcibly break apart time stop. However, if he wanted to break apart time stop by himself, it would take him a long time. Buzz! The white spiritual pearl above Duanmu head was emitting waves of light. It was faintly expanding. However, this light seemed to have received an enormous restriction and was unable to expand. Under time stop, the light origin energy had completely stopped flowing. What's going on? Why is Duanmu not moving? Jiangfan, Zhouhua, Huangfuyu and a large group of god kings were confused. Right at the moment when they were confused, a crimson figure arrived before Duanmu in a blink of an eye. Once Duanmu saw the Blood Sea Queen, he immediately recognized her to be that cold and detached god king who ignored everyone. No, Duanmu roared in his heart. However, on the surface he was unable to move in the slightest. He was unable to even speak. The Blood Sea Queen held a blood trident in her hand and ruthlessly pierced it toward Duanmu head. That was because the light origin energy was unable to flow due to time stop. Thus, Duanmu did not have any defense on his body. PFFF. The blood trident directly pierced into Duanmu head. Blood burst forth. Jiangfan, Zhouhua, Huangfuyu and a large group of god kings in the distance were all stunned. They were all stunned. From the moment Duanmu body stopped moving to the moment the Blood Sea Queen attacked, it was merely a blink of an eye. They were unable to react at all. This spiritual pearl even has a defense against the soul. The Blood Sea Queen exclaimed in surprise. When the blood trident pierced into Duanmu head, and the Blood Sea Queen's special power attacked Duanmu soul, it was actually blocked by a layer of origin energy that covered Duanmu soul. Poochie! The blood trident ruthlessly pierced into Duanmu soul. In an instant, the blood trident pierced into Duanmu soul over 100 times. Under the effect of time stop, the origin energy stopped flowing. Naturally, the origin energy that was used to defend the soul was no longer supported by the light origin spirit pearl. In a blink of an eye, the blood trident tore apart Duanmu soul and shattered his true spirit. How? How is this possible? At the moment when her true spirit was shattered, Duanmu still felt disbelief in her heart. He, one of the God King 8 great sage emperors, was actually going to die. The sage emperor, who had never fallen since the birth of the god realm, was about to fall today. Ha 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 ha. The Blood Sea Queen pulled out her blood trident. As for the all-people seal in her hand, she started to laugh heartily. After Duanmu died, the Blood Sea Queen naturally removed her time stop. Duanmu corpse immediately fell powerlessly from the sky. However, the white light origin spiritual pearl suddenly began to shine brightly. Wang, the light source spiritual pearl, which had already lost its owner, actually shone at an unprecedented level. However, its trembling seemed to be wailing, whining for the death of its master. The utmost South Sage Emperor Duanmu has died. Silence. All of the God Kings went silent. Perhaps even the death of the Azura God King wouldn't shock everyone like this. That was because an expert of the Azura God Kings level had already died in the battle of the exalted celestial mountain. However, the 8 great sage emperors that had existed since the birth of the god realm had always existed. As for the 8 great sage emperors who knew of their true responsibilities, They all knew that they were in charge of the origin energy of the entire cosmos. They were in charge of the stable operation of the entire cosmos. They believed that they would never fall. Although theoretically, people like the Azura God King and Jiang Lan, who were capable of using time stop, would be able to kill one or two of them. However, that was only in theory. In reality, no sage emperor had ever fallen. Ever since the descent of the exalted celestial mountain, so many god kings had died. However, the sage emperors had been living well the entire time. The sage emperors all believed that nothing would happen to them. However, just now the utmost South Sage Emperor Duanmuyin had died. Duanmuyin died? Zhou Hui said in a daze. Beside him, Jiang Fan, Shen Tuyen and them were also in a state of confusion. This was truly too shocking to them. The 8 great sage emperors, the 8 great sage emperors that had always existed. One of them had actually died. Father! Suddenly a mournful voice sounded. The voice was so mournful that it caused one's heart to tremble. Duanmuyu, who had been standing to the side the entire time, and had never gone to fight for the treasure, started to tremble in pain. His eyes had turned red as he firmly stared at the Death Queen. Big brother! Duanmu Rufeng also shouted loudly. During the last massacre by the Azura God King, a God King of the Lightlands city, Duanmu Lu, had died. Unexpectedly, not long after that, the head of the Lightlands city, Duanmu Yin, had also died. Currently, the only god kings left in the Lightlands city were a woman, Duanmu Rufeng, and Duanmu Yu, who had become a god king not long ago. Haha, the 8 great clan protection spiritual treasures. Today, I shall obtain one of them. The Blood Sea Queen laughed loudly. Complacently, she extended her hand toward the light source spiritual pearl. The current Blood Sea Queen possessed sufficient confidence. However, when the Blood Sea Queen tried to grab it, the origin energy of the white light source spiritual pearl actually started to surge violently. An irresistible power directly forced the Blood Sea Queen to the side, causing her to be unable to approach the light source spiritual pearl. Amen, an ownerless object is still resisting? The Blood Sea Queen Shui Yin was surprised. Whoosh! After that, the light source spiritual pearl turned into a ray of light and flew toward Duanmu Rufeng. As if it possessed intelligence, the light source spiritual pearl directly flew before Duanmu Rufeng. A drop of blood also floated out from Duanmu Rufeng's finger. After the light source spiritual pearl absorbed this drop of blood, it started to shine faintly. It actually directly floated above Duanmu Rufeng's head. The light source spiritual pearl immediately started to emit rays of light. Like a belt of light, it spread out. The surging origin energy that it emitted was not at all inferior to Duanmu Yun's. The new utmost South Sage Emperor, Duanmu Rufeng. Cries of surprise filled the purple mystic mansion. She completely refined it this easily? Qin Yu was also a bit surprised. In order to refine a grand mist spiritual treasure, it would generally require a very long time. However, this light source spiritual pearl was actually refined by Duanmu Rufeng in a blink of an eye. After all, if she didn't completely refine it, she would definitely not be able to use this much origin energy. This is very normal, Jiang Lan said with a smile on his face. Uncle Lan, this shouldn't be the case. Qin Yu looked to Jiang Lan. Jiang Li Kuro, Zhou Qiulin, Yifeng and them all looked to Jiang Lan. Jiang Lan lightly smiled and said, to be honest, Duanmu Yun's death has shocked me greatly. When the divine realm was born, the 8 great clan protection spiritual treasures descended from the heavens. They just so happened to fuse with the bloodlines of the 8 great divine families. These 8 great clan protection spiritual treasures are extremely peculiar. Any one of the spiritual pearls can only be refined and absorbed by those with matching bloodlines. These 8 great clan protection spiritual treasures, without looking at anything else, only look at one's bloodline. Jiang Lan knew about these secrets. Only look at one's bloodline? Qin Yu thought for a moment and then nodded. No wonder when Duanmu Yin died, that ownerless light source spiritual pearl would directly fly toward Duanmu Rufeng. Something's amiss. Qin Yu recalled the fire origin spiritual pearl that Lin Meng had given to his son. That fire origin spiritual pearl was exactly the same as the Shinta clan's clan protection spiritual treasure, the fire origin spiritual pearl. Uncle Lan, Little C's Fire Origin Spiritual Pearl ought to be exactly the same as the Shinta clan's Fire Origin Spiritual Pearl, right? Why is it that little C was able to refine this Fire Origin Spiritual Pearl? Qing Yu asked. Jianglan was slightly startled. He then shook his head and said, I also do not understand. However, I am extremely certain that the 8 great divine families' clan protection spiritual treasures can only be refined by those with the special bloodlines of the 8 great divine families. It is simply impossible for others to refine them. Although little C's Fire Origin Spiritual Pearl is also a Fire Origin Spiritual Pearl, I reckon that it only looks the same. There should still be some differences between it and the Shinta clan's clan protection spiritual treasure. Qing Yu's heart moved. Qing Yu thought of his second brother Lin Meng. This Lin Meng had given the Fire Origin Spiritual Pearl to Qin Si and then, with a wave of his hand, allowed Qin Si to completely refine the Fire Origin Spiritual Pearl. As this matter involves my mysterious second brother, everything is possible, Qin Yu thought in his heart. When the old sage emperor died, that light origin spiritual pearl would choose its own master. Duanmu Rufeng and Duanmu Yu were both god kings. Merely, Duanmu Rufeng had already comprehended time acceleration, and was not someone that Duanmu Yu could compare with. Furthermore, Duanmu Rufeng was from the first generation of the Duanmu clan. She was of the same generation as Duanmu Yin. Her bloodline was also purer than Duanmu Yu's. Jiang Lan said with a smile, it is only natural for the new utmost South Sage Emperor to be Duanmu Rufeng. On the exalted celestial mountain, the sage emperors all had gloomy expressions. One by one, they flew toward the Blood Sea Queen. However, the Blood Sea Queen appeared to not have noticed them. She was still standing where she was, and merely held onto her blood trident. Her crimson gown and crimson long hair were all fluttering in the wind. Haha, you all want to kill me. Haha, how could I, the Blood Sea Queen, possibly fear you all? The Blood Sea Queen stood in the air. Her voice contained an absolute domineering aura. The sage emperors, including the new utmost South Sage Emperor Duanmu Rufeng, all had gloomy expressions. After killing a sage emperor, the other sage emperors would naturally grieve. You even dare to kill a sage emperor? Blood Sea Queen, today, you shall accompany brother Duanmu Yin in death. Zhou said coldly. The other 7 sage emperors all surrounded her. However, the Blood Sea Queen Shuiyin did not appear to be worried at all. She was still standing there. You all want to kill me to accompany that Duanmu Yin in death? Interesting, interesting. The Blood Sea Queen was high-spirited. Her face was filled with confidence. Even if I, the Blood Sea Queen, were to die, at the very least 2 or 3 of you sage emperors would fall. Zhou Hua Jiangfan Huangfuyu. Who do you all think I should kill? The Blood Sea Queen asked with a smile on her face. However, the sage emperors all felt a chill in their hearts. Earlier, the Blood Sea Queen had easily killed Duanmu Yin. They were all able to guess that the reason why Duanmu Yin was unable to move was likely because he was hit by Time Stop. Time, another god king of the deity realm, who knew the Time Stop divine ability. The sage emperors had been confused the entire time as to why the Blood Sea Queen did not flee after obtaining the All-People Seal. Could it be that this Blood Sea Queen was truly going to risk her life against them? The sage emperors began to feel apprehensive. Let's not delay anymore. I'll have the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial act. Jiang Fan directly made a decision in his heart. Senior Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. Senior Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. Jiang Fan directly said via voice transmission. Jiang Fan knew very well that the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's divine awareness had covered the entire Exalted Celestial Mountain the entire time. Jiang Fan, what is it? The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's voice directly sounded in Jiang Fan's mind. Jiang Fan replied respectfully, Senior Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, you also know of the current situation. Senior Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, you should quickly act. He controlled the God Kings inside the Exalted Celestial Mountain, as well as the Azura God King outside the Exalted Celestial Mountain. Senior, you can decide whether or not to kill them, as long as they don't obstruct me. Alright. Empyrean Thunder Punishment replied. Haha. 8 great sage emperors, look at how scared you are. What a bunch of cowards. Do you really think that this queen will fight you to the death? What a joke. Goodbye everyone. The Blood Sea Queen laughed complacently. Immediately after, boom. A boundless amount of crimson-colored seawater instantly filled the entire exalted celestial mountain. The amount of crimson-colored seawater was truly too great. In an instant, it covered the entire exalted celestial mountain and overflowed the relief sculpture tunnel. It even covered over half of the Azura Sea outside the relief sculpture tunnel. The boundless blood sea was floating in the sky above the Azura Sea. What an enormous crimson-colored sea. How did this sea appear? Jiang Xing and the other god kings were all stunned. They did not know why such an enormous sea would suddenly appear on the exalted celestial mountain. Whoosh! This boundless blood sea started to shrink. It directly turned into the crimson-gowned Blood Sea Queen. The Blood Sea Queen looked to the Azura God King Luofan outside the relief sculpture tunnel with a beaming smile. Luofan, were you waiting for me? Unfortunately, the method I used to come out has greatly surpassed your expectations. Actually, even if you were to use time stop, it would still be ineffective against me. Having comprehended time stop, one could easily break through time stop. The Azura God King Luofan looked to the Blood Sea Queen. For a moment he grew silent. Seeing the Blood Sea Queen's main body, he knew that it would be very difficult to kill this Blood Sea Queen. Haha, farewell. The Blood Sea Queen laughed complacently. Little girl. Suddenly, a hand lightly patted the Blood Sea Queen's shoulder. The smile on the Blood Sea Queen's face instantly stopped. She turned her head around in disbelief. A purple-gowned, silver-haired old man was standing there indifferently. His gaze swept past her. It was as if he could see through her soul. You don't have to leave. Just stay here. Chapter 673. The sharp gaze of the purple-gowned, silver-haired old man caused the Blood Sea Queen's heart to tremble. The Blood Sea Queen paid special attention to the bright and bewitching red mole between the eyebrows of this silver-haired old man. The Blood Sea Queen, who had never met the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, did not know that the person who came was the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. However, the strange aura emitted by the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial caused the Blood Sea Queen to not even dare to think of resisting. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial waved his hand, and the all-people seal seized by the Blood Sea Queen started to float. It directly floated before the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial took a glance at the all-people seal with his sharp eyes. With a light smile he said, "All-people seal, little girl. You all are fighting over this all-people seal. Unfortunately, this all-people seal is destined to have an owner." Destined, master? The Blood Sea Queen was puzzled. Merely she did not ask. Immediately after, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial flew towards the relief sculpture tunnel of the Exalted Celestial Mountain. As for the all-people seal, it similarly floated in front of the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial and flew towards the relief sculpture tunnel together with the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. From the moment the Thunder Punishment Exalted patted her shoulder, the Blood Sea Queen discovered that she was unable to move at all. However, the Blood Sea Queen still had a trace of hope in her heart. Bind, will he be able to stop me from transforming into my true form? The Blood Sea Queen was extremely confident in her true form, the Blood Sea. When the Blood Sea Queen attempted to return to her original body, she felt that the binding around her body was extremely frightening. That powerful binding power was so strong that she was unable to even return to her original body. How is that possible? The Blood Sea Queen's heart trembled. Who is he? The Blood Sea Queen was shocked as she looked at the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, who was flying toward the relief sculpture tunnel. The Blood Sea Queen's true body was a vast sea of blood. In order to restrain the Blood Sea, the amount of restraining power required was extremely astonishing. However, the silver-haired old man was able to restrain him without batting an eyelid. With such an enormous disparity in strength, the Blood Sea Queen could only think of a single possibility. Could it be an exalted celestial? The Blood Sea Queen was unable to think of anyone other than an exalted celestial who possessed this sort of strength. In the legends, no matter how powerful a divine king was, they were also just an ant-like minor character in front of an Empyrean. Now it seemed that the rumors were not groundless. When the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial brought the All-People Seal and flew to a location near the relief sculpture tunnel, he turned around to look at the Azura God King Luofan, who was standing motionlessly in midair. Who are you? The Azura God King Luofan's heart was filled with endless shock. Ever since the moment the purple-gowned silver-haired old man appeared before him, the Azura God King felt that he was completely bound by an incomparably powerful binding power. At this moment, the Azura God King was simply unable to move in the slightest. He could only blink his eyelids and move his mouth. The dignified Azura God King did not even have the chance to sense how the other party attacked before he was bound without any resistance. It was easy to imagine how powerful the opponent was. You want to become an Empyrean? Luofan, it is not that easy to become an exalted celestial. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial smiled indifferently. Then he entered the relief sculpture tunnel. Many of the sage emperors had seen exalted celestials before. As for the Azura God King Luofan, he had only seen the unfettered exalted celestial. As for the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial and the Floating Feathers Exalted Celestial, he had never seen them before. Could he be the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial or the Floating Feathers Exalted Celestial? Luofan's heart trembled. Luofan suddenly recalled that 6 quadrillion years ago, at the final juncture of the battle for the Spirit Treasure, the Floating Feathers Exalted Celestial had secretly acted and helped the unfettered God King, whose strength was not considered to be the strongest. He had allowed the unfettered God King to become an exalted celestial. Could it be that this exalted celestial is going to interfere again like last time? Luofan felt helpless. With the appearance of an exalted celestial, who the new exalted celestial would be was no longer something that Luofan and the others could decide. Inside the purple mystic mansion, before the water screen in the inner lake, many of the Qin disciples opened their eyes wide as they watched the purple-gowned silver-haired old man enter the relief sculpture tunnel. Before this old man, the Azura God King and the Blood Sea Queen were unable to move in the slightest. Father, who is this old man? How is he so powerful? Qin Si gulped and exclaimed in surprise. Third brother, this silver-haired old man's strength seems to be frighteningly frightening. Qin Feng also exclaimed in surprise. Everyone knew about the status of the Azura God King in the divine realm. However, before this silver-haired old man, the Azura God King appeared like a child. Qin Yu looked at the water screen, and his eyes shone. A faint smile appeared on his face. This Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial has finally joined the battle. Qin Yu muttered in a low voice. Qin Yu had seen the unfettered Exalted Celestial before. As for the identity of the Floating Feathers Exalted Celestial, Qin Yu was also able to roughly determine it. Only this Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial was someone that he had never seen before. When a super expert that he had never seen before appeared, Qin Yu naturally determined that it was the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. Other than the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, Qin Yu was unable to think of anyone else that possessed such strength. Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. Jiang Lan cried out in surprise. Why did this Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial join the battle? Brother Jiang Lan, you said that it's the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial? You know him? Yifeng beside him was also a bit surprised. At this moment, the appearance of the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial had caused all of the Purple Mystic Mansion spectators to become nervous. This included the God Kings. Jiang Lan slightly nodded. That's right. Back then, I had met the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial once with that Jiang Fan. Never would I have expected that the All-People Seal would cause the Exalted Celestial to appear in the end. It would appear that the owner of this All-People Seal will be decided by the Exalted Celestial. Oh, that's not necessarily the case. Qin Yu's voice sounded. Jiang Lan, Yifeng, Zuoqiulin, Kuro. Jiang Li and a large group of people in the surroundings all looked to Qin Yu in amazement. They were somewhat surprised as to why Qin Yu would say those words. Through the water screen, Qin Yu saw the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's confident appearance. His new cosmos's spatial energy had already detected the reactions of the God Kings on the Exalted Celestial Mountain, especially that Jiang Fan. His eyes were filled with pleasant surprise. That was something that could not deceive Qin Yu. The appearance of the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial had caused Jiang Fan to be this excited. When he recalled that son-in-law of the utmost North Sage Emperor's palace, Jiang Fan had chosen Zhou Xian for no reason at all. Qin Yu was naturally able to deduce the contents of that Zhou clan's betrothal gift list. No wonder first-rate Grandma's spiritual treasures were able to cause Jiang Fan to not care about my first-rate Grandma's spiritual treasure and choose Zhou Xian. I reckon that only this portion of Exalted Celestial's spiritual treasures that contain the opportunity to become an Exalted Celestial. When a person falls from the peak of pleasant surprise to the abyss of despair, what sort of scene would that be? Qin Yu thought in his heart. After that, he lightly smiled and calmly looked at the scene of the Exalted Celestial Mountain on the water screen. The rules of the relief sculpture tunnel were things that even Exalted Celestials could not violate. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial was walking through the relief sculpture tunnel step by step. As he looked at the relief sculptures beside the relief sculpture tunnel, his eyes were filled with respect. Faced with these relief sculptures that ranged from simple to great Tao, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial did not dare to look down upon them in the slightest. After exiting the relief sculpture tunnel, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's back seemed to have become a bit straighter. His aura had also become a bit sharper. That golden all-people seal was still floating before the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's gaze was sharp. He swept his gaze over his surroundings. There were many God Kings standing in the air before him. Merely at this moment, those God Kings were all unable to move. Senior Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. Huang Fuyu cried out in alarm. Many of the sage emperors present, they had all seen the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial before. Now that they saw the appearance of the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, one could imagine how shocked they were. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial had an ice-cold smile on his face. He was a bit disappointed in his heart. Never would I have expected that Qin Yu actually did not come to fight for the All-People Seal. If he was here, I would have been able to seize the opportunity to kill him. It would appear that I can only wait for the birth of a new Exalted Celestial in order to kill him. Lord Father, that Zhou Hua flew over from afar. Currently, among the 20-plus God Kings on the Exalted Celestial Mountain, only Zhou Hua, Zhou Xian and Jiang Fan were not restricted. Other than the three of them, the rest of them were all restricted and unable to move at all. Naturally, Zhou Xian and Jiang Fan also flew over. When they were several tens of meters away from the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, Zhou Hua, Zhou Xian and Jiang Fan stopped and bowed respectfully. When Jiang Fan raised his head and looked to the All-People Seal in front of the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, his gaze started to burn. The greater the price one had to pay, the more nervous one would become when one obtained the treasure. All-People Seal, All-People Seal. It's finally mine. In an instant, Jiang Fan's heart was filled with grief, excitement, pain, excitement and all sorts of other emotions. For the All-People Seal, he had abandoned his #1 candidate for son-in-law Qin Yu. He had also abandoned his daughter and his brothers. He had paid such an enormous price. Wasn't it all for today? Today's item was the most precious of the three parts of the Exalted Celestial's spiritual treasure, the All-People Seal. Never had I expected that Senior Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial would personally act. With Senior Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial acting, it would naturally be up to Senior to decide who this All-People Seal belongs to. Although that Huang Fuyu was unable to move, he still said with a smile. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial looked to Huang Fuyu. He then looked to Putai Hong, Mu Qin, and the other sage emperors. He lightly smiled and nodded. He reckoned that these sage emperors would not dare to play any tricks. The thunder punishment exalted celestial possessed sufficient confidence. Huff! A string sound was heard in the space. The other sage emperors felt that the bindings had suddenly disappeared. These sage emperors were all able to move. However, Huangfuyu, Duanmu Ruffling, Putai Hong, and them all knew when to advance and when to retreat. They did not approach the thunder punishment exalted celestial. Instead, they respectfully bowed to him from afar. After that, they no longer said anything to disturb him. Jiangfan, this all-people seal should be yours. The thunder punishment exalted celestial said with a light smile. Those sage emperors beside him felt a trace of jealousy in their hearts. Merely, although they were jealous, they all smiled and bowed. Congratulations, Brother Jiangfan. Congratulations, Brother Jiangfan, for obtaining this all-people seal. Zhou Hua also said with a smile on his face. At this moment, Jiangfan was smiling like a flower. He immediately bowed to Zhou Hua and the other sage emperors not far away. Thank you all, thank you all. At this moment, Jiangfan was extremely excited. This all-people seal, you can accept it. The thunder punishment exalted celestial waved his hand. That golden all-people seal immediately flew toward Jiangfan, who was not far away from them. Zhou Hua and Zhou Xian both had smiles on their faces. As for Jiangfan, he was so excited that his hands started to slightly tremble. Thank you, Senior Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. Jiangfan said again. Only then did he extend his hand toward the all-people seal that was flying toward him. When the all-people seal landed in his hand, Jiangfan immediately felt that his heart had calmed down. The material of this all-people seal was a bit ice-cold. However, when it was in his hand, it easily caused one's heart to calm down. Finally, I finally obtained it. At this moment, Jiangfan felt that his eyes had started to moisten. All those sacrifices. At the moment when he grabbed the all-people seal, Jiangfan felt that everything was worth it. At this moment, he was the happiest moment since the groom search. However, right at this moment, stop. A gentle voice sounded. Immediately, the area where Jiangfan, Zhou Hua, Zhou Xian, and the thunder punishment exalted celestial were located completely disappeared. The flow of time instantly stopped. Time stop. As for the black gown Qinyu, he appeared out of thin air. Qinyu. In the distance, Huangfuyu, Duanmu Ruffing Mu Qin, Shintu Yan and the other sage emperors were all shocked. However, none of them dared to act. They also did not want to act. At this moment, with the thunder punishment exalted celestial here, how could there be a need for them to act? Qinyu has acted. Duanmu Yu, who was still unable to move in the distance, was also shocked. Not only the god kings on the exalted celestial mountain, even those god kings in the distant fog city's purple mystic mansion, and the Qin clan's descendants all opened their eyes wide in shock. Qinyu, who was originally watching with them, had actually suddenly appeared on the exalted celestial mountain. Qinyu, Jiangfan felt that he was unable to move. Jiangfan, this all-people seal is mine now. Qinyu's voice sounded in Jiangfan's mind. As for Qinyu himself, he directly grabbed the all-people seal from Jiangfan's hand without the slightest hesitation. However, Jiangfan was unable to move at all. Under time stop, he was unable to even speak. For the all-people seal, Jiangfan had given up a lot. This all-people seal could be said to be Jiangfan's lifeblood. No! Jiangfan angrily roared in his heart. However, the all-people seal still ended up in Qinyu's hand. When the all-people seal disappeared from Jiangfan's hand, Jiangfan felt as if his heart was being torn apart. He was in extreme pain. After scheming for so long, it was all for naught. Chapter 674. Although it took time to describe, Qinyu's movements were actually very fast. Once he appeared, he immediately snatched away the all-people seal from Jiangfan with a lightning speed. Qinyu. Zhou Hua and Zhou Xian's eyes involuntarily widened. There was anger and fear in their eyes. They couldn't move at all. Qinyu, you're finally here. As Empyrean Thunder Punishment saw Qinyu appear, his heart was filled with excitement. He could only attack once. If he managed to kill Qinyu in this one attack, Then he would have no choice but to kill Qinyu. It wasn't against the rules at all. Time stop is but child's play. The thunder punishment exalted celestial was extremely proficient in the laws of time. With a thought, he was about to remove the time stop. At this moment, the thunder punishment exalted celestial, who was trapped by the time stop, could not help but cry out in surprise. What sort of time stop is this? Why is it not under my control? The thunder punishment exalted celestial immediately grew anxious. Time stop was the result of the nebula's time power stopping the flow of time. How could the new universe's power of time be controlled by Empyrean thunder punishment? There were only two ways to break time stop. One was to rely on the comprehension of time stop, and the other was to use brute force to break it. However, by relying on brute force, it would usually take some time. Not good, not good. Thunder punishment exalted celestial's heart immediately tensed up. Thunder punishment exalted celestial, I'm sorry. Qinyu's ice-cold voice sounded in the thunder punishment exalted celestial's mind. After Qinyu snatched away the all-people seal from Jiang Fan, a simple and unadorned black spear suddenly appeared in his hand. The dark and yellow spots were on the shaft of the spear. It was the divine spear waning snow. Swish! Qinyu's figure suddenly shot forth. Like an arrow, he shot forth rapidly. The divine spear waning snow in his hand was pointed at Zhouhua, who was the closest to Jiang Fan. The distance of a few meters was too short. No! The source energy within Empyrean thunder punishment's body began to surge. Even the energy within the Empyrean spirit treasure, the origin sin sword, began to surge. The flow of time was also like a string that had been stretched to its limit, about to break at any moment. But, no matter how strong the thunder punishment exalted celestial was, it would still take some time for him to break through the time stop that originated from the new cosmos. That little bit of time was enough for Qinyu to kill Zhouhua. No! Zhouhua stared at the spear tip that was growing larger and larger in front of him, his heart filled with unwillingness. At this moment, he thought of the utmost South Sage Emperor Duanmuyin who had died earlier. Duanmuyin's head had also been pierced through. As for him, Zhouhua, his ending was the same. Father. Puchi. Before Zhouhua died, he was still hoping that his father, the thunder punishment exalted celestial, could save him. However, it was too late. The ice-cold divine spear waning snow mercilessly pierced into Zhouhua's head. The terrifying power of the divine spear waning snow easily tore apart the defense of the origin power on the surface of Zhouhua's soul. Bang! Zhouhua's true spirit directly dissipated. The Blood Sea Queen's Crimson Trident's attack power was inferior to even first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Not to mention Qin Yu's divine spear waning snow. With the divine spear waning snow combined with time stop, killing sage emperors was a piece of cake. Swish! The moment the divine spear waning snow pierced through Zhouhua, the speed of the spear did not decrease at all. Bang! The divine spear waning snow's body shatter ability was activated. Zhouhua's entire body exploded. He turned into an endless amount of blood, flesh, and bones. As for the black gown Qinyu, he was like a god of death. Holding the divine spear waning snow, he rapidly pierced forward. The divine spear waning snow merely changed its direction slightly. Swish! The divine spear waning snow directly pierced toward the nearby Zhouxian. The divine spear waning snow's speed was still as fast as before. Qinyu's hand was very steady. There was no hesitation at all. His gaze was firmly fixed on Zhouxian's eyes. No, don't. As Zhouxian saw the divine spear waning snow rapidly approaching him, his heart was filled with fear. In the previous instant, his father, the Northwest Sage Emperor Zhouhua, had turned into mince flesh. His true spirit had also dissipated. As for Zhouxian, his strength was far inferior when compared to the Northwest Sage Emperor. There was simply no need to doubt what the result would be if the divine spear waning snow were to pierce his head. No. Zhouxian's heart was filled with unwillingness. As he looked at the black gown, ice-cold and emotionless Qinyu, Zhouxian felt that the heavens had played a huge joke on him. When he first met that brat from the mortal realm, Zhouxian only felt that this Qinyu was merely an ant. He felt that he could kill him with a flip of his hand. However, less than 20,000 years had passed. This Qin Yu had become the new craftsman god of the divine realm, an influential figure. Furthermore, in the following few years, Qin Yu's strength increased at an astonishing speed. Before becoming a god king, Qin Yu was able to defeat Zhou Tong. After becoming a god king, Qin Yu killed Zhou Wulian, Zhou Tong, and the others. His strength was even greater than the Azura god kings. And now, he wanted to kill Zhou Xian in front of his grandfather, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. Grandfather. When the divine spear Waning Snow was only tens of centimeters away from Zhou Xian's eyes, Zhou Xian angrily roared with unwillingness in his heart. Bang! The new cosmos's power of time that restricted the flow of time suddenly collapsed. Time returned to its normal state. Time stop was broken. Qin Yu's complexion changed. This Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial is so powerful. He's even faster than I expected. Qin Yu could not help but increase the speed of the divine spear Waning Snow. However, Qin Yu was unable to stab anymore. Time reversal. A voice that sounded calm, yet contained endless anger resounded in Qin Yu's mind like thunder from the ninth heaven. Qin Yu's entire mind was buzzing. At the same time, Qin Yu felt that an extremely strange thing was happening. The surrounding time was changing. The distance between his divine spear Waning Snow and Zhou Xian was getting further and further away. He was retreating. No, not retreating. He was returning to the past. Qin Yu. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's sharp gaze was firmly fixed on Qin Yu. The shock in his heart was indescribable. At this moment he had many doubts. For example, why was Qin Yu able to enter the Exalted Celestial Mountain without going through the relief sculpture tunnel? Even Empyreans needed to go through the relief sculpture tunnel. The spatial energy of the divine realm was restricted by the Exalted Celestial Mountain. Regardless of who it was, they would not be able to teleport into the Exalted Celestial Mountain. Other than this, he was also confused as to why Qin Yu's time stop was different from ordinary time stops. Why was he unable to break through it, and could only use brute force to break through it? However, no matter how many doubts he had, they were unable to stop the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's hatred and endless anger toward Qin Yu. Die. A broad and thick enormous sword appeared in the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's hand. This enormous sword was the legendary Supreme Exalted Celestial's spiritual treasure, the Origin Sin Sword. With a slight movement of the Origin Sin Sword, a ray of sword energy shot toward Qin Yu. The speed of the Origin Sin sword energy was simply too fast. Qin Yu was still in the time reversal state when he was struck by the sword energy. Back when Qin Yu fought against the four great god kings of the Thunder Punishment City and killed Zhou Wulian and Zhou Tong, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial Mountain had attacked twice. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial attacked twice. The first time he used the single Qi 8 elements. However, the single Aura 8 elements was unable to break through the space freeze. The second move was the sword energy of the Origin Sin Sword. This sword energy was like a knife cutting through paper, easily cutting through the frozen space. The offensive power of this sword energy was far more terrifying than the single Aura 8 elements. You will undoubtedly die. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial removed the time reversal. He was extremely confident that even an Empyrean would be severely wounded by a single strike of the Origin Sin Sword. As for a God King, they would definitely die. Puff. As the sword energy entered his body, Qin Yu was like a mortal being struck by lightning. His entire body began to violently tremble. Puff. Like cheap water, Qin Yu constantly spat out blood. His entire body continued to tremble in the air. Blood constantly seeped out from his nose and eyes. His complexion was as pale as a sheet of paper. It was a horrifying sight. After being struck by the sword energy of the Origin Sin Sword, death was certain. Whoosh! The bleeding Qin Yu suddenly vanished into thin air. Before the eyes of the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial, the numerous Saint Emperors and God Kings, he vanished from the Exalted Celestial Mountain. Grandpa, chase after him. Let's quickly chase after him and kill this Qin Yu. Zhou Xian's eyes were filled with anger and grief. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial nodded and coldly said, This Qin Yu does indeed have some powerful divine abilities. He was actually able to teleport out of the exalted celestial mountain without going through the relief sculpture tunnel. In order to leave the exalted celestial mountain, one had to go through the relief sculpture tunnel. This was practically a theorem. However, Qin Yu had broken this theorem twice in a row. This so-called theorem was in fact something that geniuses would violate. Swish! A spiritual pearl surrounded by lightning suddenly flew out from the shattered flesh and blood, flying directly towards Zhou Xian. This spiritual pearl was the Zhou clan's clan protection spiritual treasure, the Thunder Origin spiritual pearl. Now that the Zhou clan only had a single god king left, Zhou Xian, the Thunder Origin spiritual pearl would naturally fall into Zhou Xian's hands. Xian first drip a drop of blood on it. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial said. Zhou Xian understood. A drop of blood immediately floated out from his fingertip and fused into the Thunder Origin spiritual pearl. The Thunder Origin spiritual pearl then floated above Zhou Xian's head. The new Northwest Sage Emperor Zhou Xian. Senior Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. That all people seal is in Qin Yu's hands. Let's quickly chase after him. Jiang Fan said impatiently. No matter how much he had given up, the all-people seal was his flesh and blood. Qin Yu had snatched away the all-people seal. Thus he naturally had to take it back. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial nodded indifferently and said, rest assured that Qin Yu had been struck by the Origin Sin Sword. His soul and true spirit have definitely been destroyed. He is undoubtedly dead. He had merely teleported away before his death. I'm afraid that he has already died. Oh, I'll accompany you all right now. Junior brother. An ice-cold voice sounded in the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's mind. You've already done the mission that Jiang Lan requested of you. You've already done it once. Thus, you cannot do it a second time. Now, you are not allowed to participate in the competition between God Kings. Quickly return. The Floating Feathers Exalted Celestial's voice contained no room for negotiation. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's expression grew solemn. Yes, eldest senior apprentice brother. Exalted Celestial Thunder Punishment immediately replied via divine sense. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial did not dare to disobey the Floating Feathers Exalted Celestial's order at all. If he were to disobey, then although the Floating Feathers Exalted Celestial did not mention the consequences, the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial was able to imagine it. The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial suddenly looked at the surrounding Saint Emperors and God Kings. He indifferently said, that Qin Yu is dead for sure. All you need to do is go to Fog City and seize the All-People Seal. In the current Fog City, the only true expert was Jiang Lan. The Azura God King and that little girl were both experts who had comprehended the time-stop remarkable ability. If the two of them joined hands, they would be able to easily defeat Jiang Lan. There is no doubt that you will be able to snatch the All-People Seal. There's no need for me to participate. After the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial finished speaking, he nodded slightly to Zhou Xian. Then, he flew directly to the relief sculpture tunnel and exited the Exalted Celestial Mountain through it. Senior Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial. The Azura God King could not help but respectfully salute. At this moment, all of the God King's bindings were removed. Furthermore, the final words spoken by the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial earlier were clearly heard by the Azura God King and the Blood Sea Queen. Qin Yu had died. The only person that could pose a threat was Jiang Lan. What was there to be afraid of? Huff! The Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial directly teleported and disappeared before everyone's eyes. As for the 8 great sage emperors, the Azura God King and the Blood Sea Queen, a cold light shined in their eyes. Qin Yu had already died. Thus, the All-People Seal was naturally easy to obtain. Outside the Fog City, Qin Yu appeared here out of thin air. Qin Yu did not immediately teleport back to the Purple Mystic Mansion. Qin Yu was afraid that his relatives would be worried. PFF. Qin Yu vomited another mouthful of blood. The attack of this exalted celestial spiritual treasure is truly frightening. Qin Yu gasped in admiration. When one's body received an attack, it would only take a blink of an eye to recover. What caused the greatest harm to Qin Yu was the damage to his soul within Qin Yu's mind. At this moment, the soul yuanying that was faintly flickering with 8 different kinds of light was circulating unceasingly. When it received the attack of the origin sin sword energy, the soul yuanying appeared to have a large wound cut open by a blade. At that moment, Qin Yu truly felt that he was nearing death. Fortunately, after the 8 great origin energies completely fused with the soul yuanying, his recovery ability had reached an unprecedented level. Furthermore, Qin Yu's soul had completely fused with the new cosmos. In an instant, the new cosmos cosmic origin began to unceasingly transmit origin energy to help Qin Yu's soul. Huff! Wiping away the trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, Qin Yu displayed a smile on his face. The power of this thunder punishment exalted celestial's attack is not small. I reckon that they all thought that I would undoubtedly die. Oh, a group of god kings are all coming? It's time for us to properly welcome them. With a flip of his hand, the all-people seal that everyone fought over appeared in Qin Yu's hand. After that, with a smile on his face, Qin Yu's figure moved. He directly returned to the Purple Mystic Mansion. Chapter 675. Fog City Purple Mystic Mansion. The appearance of Qin Yu bleeding from his 7 orifices and twitching caused the large group of people from the Purple Mystic Mansion to be shocked. They did not dare to believe that their pillar of support, Qin Yu, would actually fall. Mother, is father okay? Will something happen to father? Qin Shuang, who had grown into a handsome young man, asked Jiang Li anxiously. At this moment, Jiang Li, Jiang Lan, Zhuo Qiulin, Yifeng, Kuro and the rest of them were all in a mess. Ever since they saw Qin Yu being hacked by the origin sin sword and bleeding from his 7 apertures on the water screen, Jiang Li, Jiang Lan, Yifeng and the rest of them had become extremely nervous. Then, the image of the water curtain controlled by Qin Yu instantly blurred. Next, the water curtain directly collapsed into water and flowed into the lake. Seeing this scene, a large group of people panicked. Second brother, don't panic. Qin Si shouted at Qin Shuang. Although Qin Si said those words, there was an unconcealable worry and fear in his eyes. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Your father is fine, he's fine. Jiang Li said with certainty. Since Jiang Li and Qin Yu were soul cultivators, there was naturally a connection between them. Jiang Li could sense that Qin Yu was severely injured, especially when he was attacked by the sword Qi of the Central Plains Sin Sword. However, Jiang Li could sense Qin Yu's presence. After all, Qin Yu was still alive. He was heavily injured but not dead. Jiang Li comforted the 2 children, Qin Shuang and Qin Si, as well as those disciples of the Qin clan who were already panicking. However, Jiang Li's heart was filled with worry. Brother Yu, where are you? Come back quickly. Jiang Lan, Kuro, Zhuo Qiulin, and the other god kings were also a bit nervous. Little Yu, I've been seriously injured this time around. Jiang Lan's expression was ugly. He was extremely anxious. The origin sin sword was an Empyrean spirit treasure. The power of an Empyrean spirit treasure was astonishing in itself. Furthermore, it was used by an Empyrean himself. Its power was simply unimaginable. In Jiang Lan's heart, if an exalted celestial were to act, then god kings would definitely be killed. Not to mention that Empyrean thunder punishment was so angry that he had directly used an Empyrean spirit treasure. The destructive power of that sword could be imagined. However, Jiang Lan was confident in Qin Yu. Having watched Qin Yu grow step by step, Jiang Lan possessed a special kind of confidence in Qin Yu. Big brother, he's not dead. Everyone don't worry. My big brother is definitely not dead. He'll be back soon. Kuro said to the people around him with absolute certainty. He looked at the people around him with a resolute gaze. When those panicked and worried Qin disciples saw Kuro's calm and collected demeanor, they also calmed down inwardly. Who? Suddenly, a black-robed figure appeared above the surface of the inner lake. That familiar figure caused the Qin disciples, Jiang Li, and Kuro to be slightly stunned. However, they instantly became excited. Father! Qin Si and Qin Shuang's clear and resounding voices were the first to ring out. When Qin Si and Qin Shuang saw that familiar figure, their eyes became slightly moist. Big brother. Ho Fei and Kuro also looked to Qin Yu. Little Yu. Qin Feng and Qin Zheng also displayed pleasantly surprised smiles on their faces as they looked to Qin Yu. His brothers, his relatives. Qin Yu looked to this large group of people. From the brilliant gazes of this group of people, Qin Yu was able to clearly sense the concern and worry that his relatives and brothers had for him. Qin Yu felt a burst of warmth from the bottom of his heart. I'm fine. Qin Yu forcefully suppressed the excitement in his heart and said to the large group of people. After that, Qin Yu flew to Jiangli, Qin Si and Qin Shuang's side. The several hundred people here immediately burst into joyous laughter. Seeing that Qin Yu was fine, they were all extremely happy. Brother Yu. Jiangli, who had not appeared the entire time since she saw Qin Yu's appearance, finally called out softly at this moment. Qin Yu held Jiangli's hand. Jiangli's palm was astonishingly filled with cold sweat. Li Er, I'm sorry. Qin Yu said comfortingly. He was completely able to sense Li Er's worry and fear. Jiangli lightly leaned on Qin Yu's bosom. She was merely quietly and motionlessly. Back then, when she saw the scene of Qin Yu being struck by a sword and bleeding from his 7 apertures, she was truly frightened. She did not dare to imagine what she would do if Qin Yu were to truly die. That Qin Si and Qin Shuang were currently chattering to each other. They were even pointing at Qin Yu and Jiang Li and snickering to the side. After a long while, Jiang Li turned around and glanced at Qin Si and Qin Shuang. Little Si, little Shuang, you two brats, move to the side. Jiang Li scolded with a smile. Yes, mother. Qin Si and Qin Shuang replied while giggling. Currently, the atmosphere of the people from the Purple Mystic Mansion was extremely festive. Oh, that's right, brother Yu. What's the situation on the Exalted Celestial Mountain now? Would that thunder punishment Exalted Celestial come to kill you? Jiang Li suddenly looked to Qin Yu and asked worriedly. Hearing that, Qin Yu smiled and immediately waved his sleeve toward the air. Whoosh! A lot of the water on the lake directly flew into the air and then turned into an enormous water screen. The water screen was as clear as a mirror. It displayed the scene of the interior of the Exalted Celestial Mountain. Even the voices of the various god kings were being displayed by Qin Yu's remarkable ability. Immediately, this large group of people grew quiet. Everyone was quietly looking toward the water screen. Inside the Exalted Celestial Mountain, God Kings, that Qin Yu is already dead. The only person in the Fog City's Purple Mystic Mansion that could pose a threat is Jiang Lan. If we were to kill our way over, we would be able to easily seize the All-People Seal. Zhou Xian said with a loud voice. At this moment, Zhou Xian's heart was filled with anger. Earlier, his father Zhou Hua had died before his eyes. How he wanted to hack Qin Yu into 1,000 pieces and properly torture Qin Yu in order to avenge his father's death. It is still uncertain whether that Qin Yu is truly dead. That Blood Sea Queen Shui Yin said with a cold smile. At this moment, the Blood Sea Queen and the Azura God King had both entered the interior of the Exalted Celestial Mountain through the relief sculpture tunnel. This large group of God Kings were currently discussing the matter of seizing the All-People Seal. You dare to doubt what the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial personally said? Duanmu Ruffing shouted coldly. Duanmu Ruffing looked to the Blood Sea Queen with a gaze filled with endless killing intent and resentment. Duanmu Yin was killed by the Blood Sea Queen. This was something that a large group of people saw. However, it was truly too difficult to kill the Blood Sea Queen, especially since the Blood Sea Queen was able to turn into an endless sea of blood and escape in an instant. Although the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial personally said it, that Qin Yu had, after all, used teleportation to escape from the Exalted Celestial Mountain. For him to be able to use teleportation, it means that he was still alive at that time. Sun Lian of the Azura Sea said calmly. Many God Kings nodded. Of course, this only means that Qin Yu was still alive when he escaped. From the appearance of the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial's attack, Qin Yu ought to have been severely injured. It is very likely that Qin Yu had used teleportation before his death. Even if Qin Yu did not die, his soul would have received an unprecedented injury. That is without a doubt. Sun Lian continued. The 8 great sage emperors, and a large group of people all nodded. They agreed with what Sun Lian said. This was something that the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial had personally attacked. Furthermore, he had used an Exalted Celestial's spiritual treasure. How astonishing was that attack! Even the Thunder Punishment Exalted Celestial said that Qin Yu would definitely die. From this, one could imagine how powerful the sword strike that Qin Yu received was. Everyone, what are you all still hesitating for? Even if that Qin Yu is still alive, his soul would have received an unprecedented injury. I'm afraid that he would not be able to attack at all. He would only be a cripple. If we still do not attack now, when should we attack? That Zhou Xian said impatiently. Jiang Fan's expression was gloomy. How close was the all-people seal to him? How much did he give up for the all-people seal? However now, the all-people seal was gone. Brother Shintu sage emperors, there is no need to bother with them. We the 8 great sage emperors will attack first. Jiang Fan said directly. Let's go. Once Jiang Fan said those words, the other sage emperors immediately responded. They the 8 great sage emperors were not afraid of a single Jianglan. As for Qin Yu, he was likely already a dead man. Even if he was still alive, he would likely be unable to attack again. What was there to be afraid of? Mu Qin, why are you still fighting? Could it be that you want all of the god kings in the Forest Ocean City to die? A voice that contained anger sounded. The Northeast Sage Emperor Mu Qin turned around to look. Big brother. Mu Qin looked to the person who spoke with disbelief. The person who spoke was originally a very ordinary middle-aged man. However, his appearance soon changed. He turned into the mysterious old man that Qin Yu had met in the Eastern Sea. Mu Yu, Greenleaf God King. Jiang Fan, Shintu Yan and them all cried out in alarm. The Greenleaf God King of the Mu clan was also renowned throughout the divine realm. This time around, old man Mu Yu had changed his appearance. He had been quietly standing beside them the entire time. From the beginning to the end, old man Mu Yu had only followed the crowd. He had never been overly ambitious. Mu Qin, currently, the Mu clan only has a single God King Yu. I hope that you will carefully consider your actions. What are you planning to do? Could it be that you want to seize the all-people seal? Old man Mu Yu shouted coldly. No. Mu Qin immediately shook his head. Old man Mu Yu humphed coldly. You don't want to? If you don't want the all-people seal, then what are you fighting for? Big brother, as a sage emperor, how could I retreat by myself? Mu Qin argued. Old man Mu Yu laughed coldly. Well then, I'm too lazy to bother with you anymore. I merely hope that you will be careful in everything you do. After all, you are the only God King left in the Forest Ocean City. After he finished saying that, old man Mu Yu directly flew toward the relief sculpture tunnel. Big brother. Mu Qin shouted anxiously. If you have something to say, then say it. Old man Mu Yu stopped. Are you able to return to the Forest Ocean City? Mu Qin asked expectantly. Old man Mu Yu lightly laughed. He then flew toward the relief sculpture tunnel even faster. Mu Qin, the decision that I have made will not change. As for you, take care of yourself. After he finished saying that, Mu Yu entered the relief sculpture tunnel. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.